La 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 la. Oh, hello, Miva the Fox. Hello, everybody! С вами Сефириза, и сегодня я буду продолжать немножко артфайтить, да, чуть. Hello, hello.
There's nuance to how we perceive games, and everyone is different. But from my personal experience and from how I have seen people
Сыр фета, это я. О, так, еще одно коверканье имени в копилку будет. Надо это записать. Привет, Михаил, how are you doing?
A game that included fast travel, but only through unique modes of transportation where some options are more limited than others. Morrowind is considered by many to be the Elder Scrolls at its best. The player's freedom, the immersion, the possibilities. Now, this individual
Я даже не стала, блин, в ВК писать анонс на стриме, потому что, блядь, ощущение, что все равно никто этого не видит.
And the game world, Oblivion feels more limiting in that
У
regard.
меня был недельный отпуск, поэтому не посещал канцеляшки. Ничего страшного. Ты просто смотрела дубляж, нет. Я забыла. Лурк. О, лурк, 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 лурк. Так, что теперь? Мне надо вторую.
Oblivion seemed to be stepping away from that somewhat. Morrowind was a game of countless quests for a variety of factions, and Oblivion cut down on those by a mile. Dialogue was cut down, quest lines were cut down, and abilities were cut down, so you can probably understand why the Morrowind player is disappointed.
Я жду особенно
Well, what if we had an Oblivion player? Someone who was introduced to the series with the fourth entry. This individual loved the world of Tamriel within the confines of Cyrodiil, the vibrant colors and fantastical designs in armor and weapons. The towns are full of life and the voice dialogue of various NPCs having awkward but full conversations with one another. Oblivion in many ways offered aspects of an immersive role-playing experience that Morrowind did not. For that reason, the Oblivion player may have a harder time going back and trying Morrowind. They may be dissatisfied with the amount of unvoiced text, with the combat, and the sheer obtuseness and design that many older players praise Morrowind for, but many newer players may find great. Conversely, this Oblivion player, much like the Morrowind player, may be disappointed with the release of Skyrim, where Oblivion and Morrowind focus solely on developing your skill set and planning your level up. Skyrim streamlined the process, introduced a perk system, and the quests were a shadow of what Oblivion's narrative direction had offered. So we're left with the Skyrim player, a player who is missing out on the vibrancy of Oblivion, but makes up for it with the developed overworld and towns. The more simplistic progression system that helps individuals get straight into the action. The civil war between the Empire and the Nords. The ability to kill dragons and learn shouts to use in combat. Dungeons that may be considered more elaborate visually than what Oblivion or Morrowind had to offer. The crafting mechanics, the upgraded combat, and so much more. Skyrim offered players things they couldn't get in Oblivion or Morrowind. Oblivion offered things players couldn't get in Morrowind or Skyrim, and Morrowind 2 offered things absent from its sequels. The point I'm making is that it makes sense why newer players may have difficulty going backwards in the series while older players are continually disappointed with the changes made throughout. I'm saying that I understand why players of Morrowind might not enjoy the newer games and that a lot of their criticisms may be justifiable, because I have similar gripes with Skyrim as someone who started with Oblivion, but my start didn't inhibit me from enjoying Skyrim at all. It still had plenty to offer me in terms of immersion and enjoyability that I couldn't get from the previous entries, and while still loving Oblivion the most, I will find myself returning to Skyrim just as much as I return to Cyrodiil. Like I said, it's not a rule or a law. It's a natural aspect of how we perceive mechanics as design philosophies change with time and technology. Games play differently than they did in the past. Sometimes grander experiences mean you can't get as in-depth mechanically as a past game. As an example, I originally found Morrowind fairly obtuse to get into when I first tried to, but once I understood the rules, the controls, how to live within the world, I began to see why Morrowind was so
длится
special, and I
12
was able
часов.
to appreciate what it offered to players before the release of Oblivion or Skyrim. I even wished
Чтоб
for Oblivion to
наверняка
have a
не
similar
закончился,
experience.
пока
All
я
this to say
стримлю.
that I think Oblivion currently is in a weird place for fans of the series. Morrowind players may be disappointed with the drastic changes made from the third entry to the fourth, and Skyrim players may be turned off by the potato-faced NPCs, dorky dialogue, and convoluted leveling system. But much like how I could see the charm in Morrowind, and much like how there are still aspects of Skyrim I enjoy that Oblivion can't offer me, I believe Oblivion has something that it can offer that other entries can't. A certain charm that was lost. The hilarious characters you meet, the vibrant landscape, one of the best DLC expansions in Bethesda history. Oblivion has a lot to offer, and I can say that I am lucky to have found it when I did because this game changed my life and perspective on what was possible within the medium. I was introduced to Elder Scrolls in a weird way. I had never heard of the series at all until the release of the PS3 version of Oblivion. I was watching reviews on The Run, or Judgment Day if you're American, hosted by Victor Lucas and a now notorious Tommy Tallarico. Thank you, H Bomber Guy, for that one. The footage I saw for the game looked ludicrous in my opinion. It didn't interest me at all. I witnessed first-person gameplay in tight, confined cave tunnels, while the player threw firewalls at a skeleton. I think I was 14 and I hadn't really expanded my palette for games too well. I wasn't able to recognize a good thing when I saw it, even if the reviews for it were stellar. My grandfather loves playing video games even today, but I'd say he's strictly into first and third person shooters. Call of Duty, Sniper Elite, and similar experiences. I remember walking into EB Games and him asking me for suggestions on what to get. I knew I wasn't interested in it, but I pointed out he could grab Oblivion for his console and give it a try. Not soon after, he told me how he dropped the game almost immediately. He was very impatient with things like this, and it wasn't his thing. Probably a bit too confusing and open, making it a huge leap from what he was used to. Still, I went over to my grandparents a lot, and since he owned it, I decided I'd at least give the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion a go. Have you ever played a game that woke something up inside you? It's like the feeling 5-year-olds have when they randomly gain consciousness at preschool. Kind of a life-changing experience in how you perceive games and what you want from them. To me, having never played something like it before, Oblivion was revolutionary. Something I had desperately needed but never realized at the time. Maybe Morrowind or Skyrim is a game like that for you. One that you can go back to and play endlessly. New Vegas was like that for me with the Fallout series, but in a different way. Oblivion introduced me to open world RPGs, and New Vegas introduced me to something else later on. Maybe how much I enjoyed the narrative and the developed characters. In a way, these games were building blocks that allowed me to fully appreciate the genre and expect more out of it and other games like it, even unrelated ones. I spent hours and hours of my visits there playing Oblivion until enough was enough, and I had to have it for myself. I bought a copy for my 360 and later on the Game of the Year edition for PC, marking the rest as history. I've played Oblivion countless times since then. I waited eagerly for Skyrim after it was announced and then spent a large portion of my life playing that as well. Sure, aspects of it disappointed me, but I still loved it. I even managed to finally go back and work my way through Morrowind, learning to appreciate how absolutely busted a magic character could be in that game, wishing they would bring that depth of mechanics back for future releases, but not expecting it. Oblivion is one of those games I wish I could play for the first time again, and something these retrospectives let me do is really sit down with and explore every aspect of the games I love. Similar to Bethesda's Fallout games, it's a little difficult to play on modern hardware if you don't know what you're doing. It might work out of the box for you, but to really get it stable and to fix a variety of bugs that may plague you, mods and other utilities may be necessary. They were for me on this playthrough, but that never stopped me. Bethesda has created this culture where mods are expected for their games, for better or for worse. I know that some of the most fun I have is finding, installing, and troubleshooting mods until I get so tired of working on it that I don't even want to play the game I was modding. I feel like we've all been there at least once. I don't know how long this script is going to be, but if it's anything like New Vegas, and with the amount of content there is to go over, I imagine it'll be pretty big. Today we'll be going over all of what Oblivion has to offer. Its development, its main quest line, the factions, side quests from town to town, areas of note to explore, the DLC, and expansions. As much as I can think to look into that I believe is justified in going over, And while this game does hold a special place in my heart, I have a fair bit of criticism for many choices made along the way. Oblivion is an amazing experience, but just like every other Bethesda product out there, it is far from perfect. If you enjoy these videos, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, as it helps me continue to make this content for you all. With that out of the way, I'm Super Rad, and this is the Big Oblivion Retrospective. As with most Bethesda games, I'm offering a quick preface to let you know that multiple mods and any file tweaks were used in the creation of this video. Oblivion has many issues on modern hardware that can prevent a smooth playing experience and also hinder my recordings. Almost all of these mods are bug fixes, and the only thing that slightly affects gameplay are the unofficial patches. However, I have added mods that allow me to play the game borderless while retaining an acceptable frame rate that isn't normally possible in Oblivion. I even kept the UI the same for this playthrough, which I never do, so it's as vanilla as I can manage. If that's an issue for you, please note that I will still be discussing and critiquing aspects of the games as if they were fully vanilla. Think of it as vanilla plus. I'll even be mentioning some tidbits the unofficial patches seem to fix, such as killing the Great Prince in the arena, counting for murder if you completed his optional quest line first. It may sound surprising, but development for Oblivion started in 2002, just after Morrowind had been released. It's understandable why. Games the size of Morrowind and Oblivion require years of development to complete, and even then there are delays that further lengthen this process. Development of Morrowind wasn't complete as 2 expansions were to be developed for it as well. The team at Bethesda was split into 2, with half the team working on Oblivion and the other half working on the expansions. Since the idea of Oblivion was already thought out, this allowed the developers to add foreshadowing to the 4th entry within Morrowind's Tribunal expansion. There's a 40-minute making of documentary out there that you can find on YouTube. It's the source of the infamous Chess Club quote from Todd Howard. I believe it's required viewing if you're a fan of the series, as it showcases how much effort and love went into the development of the game. Everyone interviewed seems to specialize in whatever section of the game they are working on, and the reason for that specialization is due to their love of it. There's a woman in the documentary non-bipedal animals in the game, and you can see how meticulous she is with creating the animations for the horses in Oblivion because she loves to ride horses. You get to see a lot of that love firsthand, and it makes you realize how much blood and sweat went into the game, and I believe it showed. The reception of the original reveal, trailer, and demo at E3 was overwhelmingly positive. The graphics were considered jaw-dropping at the time. It had physics similar to Half-Life 2 via the Havoc engine, and the gameplay looked immersive. In terms of first impressions, Oblivion hit it out of the park. Designers had to make comparisons to Morrowind and decide what could be reworked and what would stay the same. In a way, Todd Howard and Gavin Carter, Oblivion's producer, wanted to make aspects of the series bigger and better than they had ever been before. Ironically, this somewhat limited what was offered in Oblivion in comparison to Morrowind, for better or worse. Despite what some may believe, I look at the Morrowind quest line as fairly linear. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think the perception is that it was more open than it actually was. To its credit, Morrowind's main questline had a lot of stopping points where the player was encouraged to go off and do something else in the world before returning, something that Oblivion sorely lacks. In a lot of ways, Morrowind feels bigger and more full of content than Oblivion turned out, but that's on purpose. The producers wanted to remove what they considered filler quests, and if you've played Morrowind, you know what I mean. Factions and individuals may have a treasure trove of quests for you to take on, but many of these quests lack any real depth. There are special cases here and there to be sure, but many of the faction quests can be boiled down to escort this individual, get me an item from this dungeon, go kill this person for me, etc. Again, to Morrowind's credit, this isn't always the case, and some quests, while offering shallow narratives, end up finding depth in their mechanics. There's one where you need a journal entry and someone is willing to give it to you if you escort them to town.
Простите, что ударила микрофон.
You kill them along the way. Need to kill someone but don't want to alert the guard? Try threatening and harassing them verbally until they throw the first punch. Morrowind was great for that, but over the course of a long playthrough, you may be left wanting more from the game narratively. This was was the design philosophy of the major Oblivion quests. Not every quest was a hit, but many were designed to have engaging storylines and developments that made them feel real and impactful in comparison to Oblivion's predecessor. We'll get to see this firsthand when we start exploring these quest lines, and there's a reason Oblivion's quests are remembered so fondly today. You have some weaker storylines like the Fighters Guild or the Arena, but you also have the Dark Brotherhood, which has never been topped by Bethesda in my eyes. The designers wanted the story to be tighter and more impactful, more cinematic in a way, and I believe they succeeded in that, even if it is the antithesis to Morrowind's design philosophy. That's a big aspect I failed to mention in the intro of this retrospective. I often see people complain about how mechanics from previous games continue to get simplified or removed when the next entry comes out. And I understand this sentiment. I feel this way with each new Monster Hunter release. I know what it feels like, but that doesn't mean I see these sequels as pure downgrades, where something is taken out or made more simplistic, another aspect of the game is built on and made better. It's all about where the developers want to see improvement and what the balance of development time will look like. I do get it though. The simplicity of Skyrim in comparison to Oblivion, as I mentioned previously, is something that disappoints me, but I found it was made up for with a world I wanted to explore and combat I ended up enjoying more than previous entries, except magic. I think magic has never been as good as it was in Morrowind. Hilariously, the team's perception of magic in Morrowind was that it was too weak and couldn't be effectively used to progress through the game with magic alone. If you put any real time into Morrowind's magic system, you know this isn't the case, and what ended up happening was we received a neutered version of the magic system in Oblivion, one that was missing most of the broken use cases and nuance from the previous entry. Sometimes a change in design direction makes sense and we have to deal with the idea that other mechanics from past games aren't going to get as much focus. Other times, like with the magic system from Morrowind to Oblivion, the developers just dropped the ball. The idea that magic was too weak in Morrowind just shows that sometimes the developers don't understand their own game like the fans that play them. Gavin Carter wanted everything to be focused on the plot and held disdain for side quests far removed from it, believing that they take away from the main experience. Ironically, the side quests of Oblivion ended up being the main experience, possibly what the game is truly known for, and this carried over into Skyrim. I doubt many would say that they play Skyrim so that they can go defeat Alduin again. More likely, they play it to experience all the factions, side quests, and DLC the game has to offer while exploring as much as they can. I'm sure someone will correct me and say they play it for the main quests in the comments. Everything Carter seemed to want, from less intrusive side quests to a main questline that would naturally allow you to explore, seemed to be flipped on its head. I'll get into it more later, but straying from the Oblivion storyline is very difficult from a role-playing sense. Additionally, there comes a point where the Oblivion gates start popping up, and these can directly interfere or intrude on your exploration of the game world. The storyline of Oblivion is very prevalent in the game world, and that is both good and bad from a role-playing sense. Oblivion was developed on a tweaked and suited up version of the Gamebryo engine, which would be Bethesda's second release with it, Morrowind being the first back when the engine was known as Net Immerse. It would be used again later for Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas before upgrading it again further under the Creation Engine title for Fallout 4 and Skyrim. At the time, Oblivion was considered a graphical wonder. Sure, the game is notorious for the potato-faced NPCs, but the landscapes, weapons, and armor were something to wonder about. Part of this was due to the dedicated design teams who would regularly go out to research forests, architecture, and more in order to use those designs as inspiration for their game world. Even today, Oblivion still manages to feel leaps and bounds more fantastical in design than its sequel, Skyrim, even if the latter is graphically superior. It's almost timeless in a way, if not for the technical issues that plague it. Maybe timeless isn't the right word, especially since Oblivion focused so heavily on bloom lighting, which has become a lighting style that looks visually dated in comparison to what is used today. Oblivion has two lighting options within its PC settings, those being bloom and HDR. Unfortunately, HDR doesn't allow the use of the game's anti-aliasing feature, leading to some particularly jaggy looking characters from a distance, but it does offer what I guess would be considered a more accurate or realistic lighting model. Nowadays, you can force anti-aliasing from your graphics card's control panel and have the best of both worlds if you want. Personally, I'm still partial to the Bloom for nostalgia's sake, and I just think it looks better overall alongside the aesthetic of Oblivion, but I did end up switching to HDR at some point due to some graphical issues I was having. The game was published for Xbox 360 as the base console alongside a PC release on March 21st, 2006. This was after a delay that was a surprisingly big deal, considering Take-Two, the company co-publishing alongside Bethesda, were dealing with several instances of bad PR already. This was the time of the hot coffee controversy after all, if you know what that is. Despite those delays, Bethesda began producing updates every weekend up to release, although these only ever boiled down to, "We are working really hard on the game. Thanks for asking," with no real details provided. Despite this, the relationship between Bethesda and Take-Two was very strong. Bethesda retained the rights to the Elder Scrolls game, and Take-Two also gave them full creative control with the project, something that is incredibly rare within the game development market. This freedom and trust allowed the team to make a product that they were happy with despite delays, which are a necessary evil in my opinion. Especially considering that Todd actively mentions how the developers were experiencing a severe crunch leading up to the E3 trailer and demo deadline. "I want shorter games with worse graphics made by people who are paid more to work less, and I am not kidding." Oblivion was the first RPG to be released on the Xbox 360, and it was also the first game to pioneer and popularize the use of microtransactions. Consumers were used to purchasing expansions already, but the idea of cheaper and smaller content being released for purchase was a new concept and one that faced severe backlash, not just towards Bethesda, but the gaming market as a whole, as more developers began to adopt the practice, solidifying it as an expected aspect of modern games. At least Oblivion wasn't as bad as all the Sims expansions. Despite the backlash, Oblivion saw great success in its microtransaction market, but they weren't without controversy, and we'll explore that a bit later. As an interesting note, and something seen fairly often in game development, the overall lighting of Oblivion seemed to be much more elaborate before release, with strong shadows, some of which obfuscated the world around you and made the use of torches more crucial. Now, I believe this was seen by internal teams and by viewers of the documentary after the release of the game, so I'm not accusing the team of anything here. It's just an interesting aspect of the development process, seeing where things needed to be reworked. Another example comes in the documentary where developers were showing off an in-studio demo of the Radiant AI system, something that is a staple for Bethesda RPGs. In the demo, an NPC is shown living their life inside their house, taking time to eat and walk around, which is something we see in the final product. Other, more interesting aspects are of the NPC practicing archery and getting actively better after drinking a fortified marksmanship potion, which is not how it works really in the game, because I think it's all damage based with bows and arrows, so it just really doesn't make any sense. Or seeing the NPC's dog get hungry and beg for food while the NPC is sleeping, angering her and having her light the dog on fire, which the team then all laugh about around the table. A little weird. Make no mistake, the Radiant AI system is a great mechanic, but one that has always been oversold by Bethesda. Claiming it to free them from scripting 1,000 NPCs to do various specific things, the reality is that the tool allows the scripting of tasks that can be assigned to various NPCs with conditions applied to them. Have a specific NPC, eat at specific time periods, and if they don't have food on them, have them look for it. If they can't find food, check the responsibility stack and see if they can steal some. It's not revolutionary by any means, but it does help diminish the workload while still providing an aspect of realism to the NPCs populating the game world. But because the system takes so much of the load off, it can lead to some pretty hilarious and unexpected results, many of which were the job of the QA to find so that they could be remedied. That didn't stop some from slipping through the cracks, however. Take Dro Narahi, who is the steward of the castle in Greville, which is pretty far south in Cyrodiil. For whatever reason, Dro lives in Bruna, which is far to the north within Cyrodiil, forcing her to walk alone along the green road for such a length of time that she has to turn around and resume her duties. Unfortunately for Dro, this can lead to her being killed by the wildlife fairly easily into a playthrough. Things like this were a big problem at the start of the Radiant AI's utilization. Characters may constantly try to steal from other characters and end up dead in the process. There's an example mentioned by the team where a character went around town buying up all of the armor so there wasn't anything left for the player character. Radiant AI has a lot of potential and was creative in its design, but due to the limitations of how we can control the logic of simulated individuals who have pseudo-free will, the system's rules had to become more restrictive and toned down for gameplay purposes. This led to a lot of NPCs simply standing around and doing nothing. They do some things here and there, but nowhere near what was possible at the start of testing. The funniest part about this is that you rarely see these events take place since the game world is simulated to go on even when you aren't in the area. And you find murdered characters along the road and have no idea what led to this outcome. These aren't the only silly aspects of the design process, though. A major talking point surrounding Oblivion is the NPC's voice acting. The original release of the game, not including expansions, had 10 dedicated voice actors who were tasked with voicing 1,000 plus NPCs, leading to a lot of overlap considering the talking style rarely changes. You can find yourself talking to one NPC and then immediately in another conversation with someone who sounds exactly the same. I don't have a personal issue with this, it's just a funny aspect of the development process. You can't expect a developer to hire 1,000 voice actors so everyone sounds unique. No one does that. What you may expect a developer to do is come up with an easy way to sort lines of dialogue for the voice actors to read, such as by quest or location. Unfortunately for the actors, these lines were all sorted alphabetically, meaning that the conversations were not kept together, leading to problems during voice recording involving emotion, inflection, etc. Anything you can think of. If you ever felt the way the characters talk is somewhat odd, that's the reason. Among the 10 voice actors, Todd Howard also voiced Albin Karinis and Clavicus Vile. More recognizably, Patrick Stewart voiced Uriel Septim, Sean Bean voiced Martin Septim, and Terrence Stamp voiced Mankar Cameron. Terrence Stamp was General Zod in the original Superman movies. Coincidentally to that point, Linda Carter was a famous singer, model, and actress who played Wonder Woman in the 1975 Wonder Woman television series. Linda voices all of the Nord and Orc NPCs and has voiced Nords in Morrowind as well as Skyrim. Oblivion was the first in this series to have such in-depth voice acting, and for a game as large and open as it was a revolutionary feat to have so many interactable people, all who had something to say to you without you needing to read a dialogue box. The work in recording was tremendous, and in its original release, the recorded dialogue took up half of the DVD the game was burned onto. I think what's important to consider here is that Todd wanted Oblivion to be different, not just an upgraded Morrowind. Oblivion was to be an Elder Scrolls game, but to offer a new experience, to play differently and be unique. In a way, this can be seen in its simplification in some areas and growth in others. Previous players may or may not have enjoyed the changes, but it's difficult to not say Oblivion ended up being its own unique experience for the better. It's not just the gameplay that helps make each entry feel unique in its own. The music, composed by Jeremy Soule, is also a huge factor in each entry's identity. The music of Oblivion is one of the best aspects, and that might make it sound like the gameplay falters, but that's not the case. What I'm trying to say is that the music is just that good. Even when I first played the game, I found the music comforting, and it was producing a nostalgic response in me even though I had never heard it before. The soundtrack is beautiful in that way. And considering that Oblivion never stops working through the soundtrack as you play, it has to be that good as to not overstay its welcome. It's funny, Todd wasn't a big fan of shows like E3 at the time of the demo's development. This was back during the time of every developer having a booth, the concept of booth babes, and a hyper focus on selling and marketing games towards young men. I guess it felt like a farce in some ways. Bethesda tried for a more laid-back approach, having a darker room with comfortable couches and chairs that would allow the individuals within to experience the game as naturally as possible. Despite this contempt, the Elder Scrolls gameplay reveal and trailer were met with positive reception, and the game's release in 2007, followed by its PS3 release in 2008, met equal praise. The PS3 edition ended up having its own delay, not just on release, but also with DLC not being available even though it was already on 360 and PC. Despite this, it eventually caught up with its own slew of bugs that Bethesda made. I won't be getting into them in this video, but it is interesting to point out that Oblivion was slated to have a PSP release as well. It wouldn't have been the full Oblivion experience, but prototype gameplay does show battles that are similar in comparison, as well as the ability to visit various cities and talk to NPCs. PCs. Unfortunately, the game was cancelled early in development, but Oblivion did have a mobile phone spin-off release in 2021. I think that's enough for the development of the game right now. While Oblivion had its delays, bugs, and issues, you can tell that the team behind it cared about what they were working on, and I believe this benefited the product overall. Now let's take a look at the game itself, explore the storyline, and everything there is to do. Oblivion opens up with a monologue from Uriel Septim, aka Patrick Stewart. Patrick was excited for the role after receiving the script and notes from Bethesda. Todd comments on how he was embarrassed with the amount of notes his team provided, but Patrick ended up being impressed with such a detailed amount of information that would better fit into the role of the Emperor. I say Emperor because Patrick Stewart plays Emperor Uriel Septim VII, who was the 21st ruler of the Empire and held the title for 65 years. I won't be delving too far into the lore of Oblivion as I want to focus on the storyline at hand, but it helps to have some context considering the long history of the Elder Scrolls series as well as all the backstory set up to help enrich the player experience as they explore the various continents of Tamriel. Tamriel is one of the continents on Nirn, the planet and sometimes referred to as the mortal plane that makes up the setting of the Elder Scrolls. I say mortal plane because there are other planes of existence within the game's universe, and the fourth entry in the series focuses on such planes which together are known as
Привет,
Oblivion.
Lara, how are you doing?
From my understanding, it's more accurate to say that Mundus is the mortal plane of existence and Nirn is its core or colloquially a planet within it. You can feel free to correct me on that in the comments if something seems off with that explanation. Just check to see if I already corrected it. The game Oblivion takes place in Tamriel, but more specifically within the province of Cyrodiil, which is the capital of the Third Empire or Septim Empire, as it was created by Tiber Septim, a renowned military leader who would ascend through history and become a god known and worshipped as Talos. This is important in Oblivion, but equally if not more so in Skyrim due to the trouble that comes with worshipping what some see as a false god. Talos is considered divine within the mechanics and world of the game, but the actions that show that seem to be contained within the games and only a small population of individuals actually come to see this proven firsthand. Like I said, I don't want to delve too deep into the lore of the series in its entirety, but it's good to have an idea of the setting we will be playing within. Cyrodiil is home to the Imperials, Skyrim is the home of the Nords, Black Marsh the home of the Argonians, Elsewhere for the Khajiit, Hammerfell for the Redguards, High Rock for the Bretons, and so on. Each of the major races hail from a specific area, and the settings of the Elder Scrolls games usually take place in one of the locations. Morrowind took place in Morrowind, Skyrim in Skyrim, and Oblivion in Cyrodiil. Going back further, this isn't entirely the case. I believe Arena takes place over the entire continent. Players of even Morrowind might not know this, but Uriel is actually a recurring character within the series, appearing in both Arena and Daggerfall. For longtime fans of the series, this would be the culmination of Uriel's storyline and the start of a new story for one within his bloodline. Uriel tells us through his monologue and throughout his life, he has never been in control of his own dreams, suggesting that he has visions constantly that tell him of what will transpire in the future. He's seen the gates of Oblivion being opened and has also seen his own demise, something we will soon learn he is content with. You may be wondering why Uriel can have these visions, and you may assume it's due to him being a Septim. It's suggested that this is the case, but never made clear if every Septim has this ability. Uriel is considered a seer within the universe of the Elder Scrolls, an individual who has been gifted divine power to allow them to see visions through their dreams, so we could reason this is due to his connection to Talos. In terms of openings, the start of Oblivion is one of the best in the series, and it doesn't offer much. We have the monologue from Uriel to set the narrative, sure, but it's the sweeping view of the land of Cyrodiil and the swelling of the game's theme song that really gets you in the mood for an adventure. The opening alone manages to make the player feel like they are about to set foot within a large, wide-open world with the Imperial city dead center. It's hard to explain, but there's something special about this presentation. It feels grand in a way I believe neither Morrowind nor Skyrim manages to offer. For example, Morrowind's opening segment is mechanically liberating and satisfying, but not overly cinematic. We get a bit of narrative focusing on how you were the chosen one, but unsure as to what, and then you're basically left to your own devices. with a simple goal of delivering a package to Caius in the city of Balmora. Skyrim, meanwhile, has a little to offer at the start and instead plops you into a scripted segment meant to showcase the overall ambition of the game by having you survive a dragon attack as the town is destroyed. Oblivion lands closer to Skyrim here in terms of being on rails for the opening segment, but it's at a pace that is dictated by the player, rather than trying to thrust you into the action immediately. Like Morrowind, you are an Imperial prisoner, but unlike Morrowind, you weren't shipped off from the province. Instead, as the opening concludes, we see the view take us from the skies above the Imperial City into the dungeons of the Imperial Prison, and we are then introduced to our character, a nobody, not a dragonborn like in Skyrim, and not a chosen one like in Morrowind, although Uriel will mention shortly that he has seen us within his visions. Instead, we are a blank slate, as blank as being a prisoner will let you be anyway. I've mentioned this in multiple Bethesda retrospectives, but I have no issue with the prisoner start. I think there are plenty of ways for a player to reason why their character is there, whether it was deserved imprisonment or not, and Oblivion, like Morrowind, facilitates that, although not as well mechanically. I mentioned this offhand, but Morrowind is great because it doesn't set urgency right away. The developers care about their world and they want you to feel compelled to explore it. Once off the boat, the only thing you are asked to do is deliver a package, and you can do that whenever you want without it hanging in the back of your head. You don't know Caius, and you may feel no obligation to deliver anything to him. It's just a means of setting you along the path of the main storyline if you want. Oblivion gives us the freedom to feel like a blank slate and start as we want, but as we will soon see, it delivers that sense of urgency so soon that once we are able to begin exploring, it may feel difficult to justify as there are more pressing matters to address. We could compare it to New Vegas as well. The main goal the game wants you to focus on to progress the storyline is finding the man that shot you in the head, but you don't have the same compulsion to do so if you want your character to focus on other things first. Benny isn't going anywhere, and finding him isn't going to prevent the destruction of the world. With Oblivion, the stakes are much higher, and it's understandable that you may feel it necessary to work through the storyline before venturing off to complete side quests. This seems intentional. As I mentioned in the development section, the developers wanted to have a more cohesive, cinematic, and fluid storyline, one that had weight and consequence, not necessarily in your actions or from a moral sense, but in how the events would shape the world around you. Side quests were considered a distraction, and the game was designed in a way where you are sort of forced to feel that way as well, even though those side quests are the best part of the game. It's a balancing act and hard to get right, and I feel that the direction they took Oblivion is what they decided to double down on when making Skyrim, rather than revisiting what made Morrowind's opening so appealing to players from a gameplay sense. So yes, in Oblivion, at the very least, you are just some guy, at least until one of the expansions that we'll be talking about later. So you watch the opening and now you're thrust into the Imperial Prison, where you get to take part in what I would consider a notorious character creation process for a variety of reasons. For one, this is your first real look at what characters within Oblivion look like. If there is anything Oblivion is knocked for, it's the visual style of the NPCs' faces, known to resemble potatoes by the community. Now, I'm not going to defend these faces, it's pretty clear how comical they look. I mean, just check the side profile of the Khajiit and you can see that they are basically normal faces that have just been comically elongated around the snout. But believe it or not, this was considered impressive at the time. To have characters with the level of detail Oblivion had littered around the game world was impressive and helped with the overall immersion of the experience. Even back near release though, I could still tell that these faces were silly for lack of a better term. These designs, while hilarious looking back, are a staple of Oblivion to a point where they help exude the character of the game's atmosphere and world. Oblivion
театр, я сейчас
without the comical
свалюсь
character
спать.
design and dialogue.
Что со мной происходит?
And that's what Oblivion tends to feel like. A dream world where things feel fantastical, but they also feel off. The world and characters of Oblivion are uncanny and fantastical, and they help make the series stand out from any other game that existed, while allowing it to still be one of the most unique games visually in the series. Again, the developers did what they could to design 1,000 plus characters with face gen at a time where this was unheard of, and it shows as you talk and interact with the various NPCs you'll meet along your journey. It's not impossible to make a character that looks at least somewhat normal in the game world. I I don't think I made someone that looked perfect by any means, but I like to believe that he is somewhat realistic in design. The issue is that by making a character look in any way realistic, they end up being an unrealistic aspect of the game world when compared to everyone else. Interacting with various NPCs while in first person, only to take a look at your more realistic character in the inventory screen can be off-putting at best. One of the first choices you need to make in character creation is which race you plan to play as throughout the experience. Races affect a variety of mechanics, some more important than others. Outside of things like your appearance and voice, your race can influence how other races may respond to you offhand, as well as their base disposition when first interacting with you. Beyond that, race will affect your starting attributes, which make up your physical abilities in the game. These abilities can be raised each level up, but we'll talk more about that later. Attributes are affected by both race and sex, so if you're a female Breton, you're going to have different bonuses, not just to a male orc, but a male Breton as well. Additionally, 45 skill points are allocated to various skills as a bonus depending on race. What you are initially strong in and talented with within the game world is drastically different depending on your start, but no matter what choice you make, you can end up within the same place via gameplay and skill building. Race selection is more for role-playing purposes in this sense. If you play Oblivion long enough and you play it well, most characters are going to end up functioning the same with minor differences here and there. Things like character height, which is also dictated by race, can affect things like your speed, so you may want to take that into account when selecting. Additionally, each race gets a bonus of some kind. Bretons, for example, get an extra 50 points in Magicka, giving them a higher mana pool. They also gain a 50% magic passive ability, as well as an activated shield spell that can only be used once per day. High Elves, meanwhile, have 100 extra magicka and resist disease more effectively than other races, but have weaknesses to elemental spells. Each race has these bonuses, and I won't be going over all of them. Some are passive, some are activated, and each race will generally have an assortment to make them more unique than their attributes and skills would allow them to be. There are 10 races to choose from, 4 human races, 4 elven races, and 2 beast races respectively. Humans include Bretons, Imperials, Nords, and Redguards. Elves include Altmer, Bosmer, and Dunmer, as well as orcs. Most people may refer to these as High Elves, Wood Elves, Dark Elves, and orcs. The 2 beast classes are Khajiit, a cat-like race, and Argonians, a lizard-like one. The choice is yours. For this playthrough, I opted to play as Breton, which was a first for me. In Oblivion, I often played Redguard as they were considered specialists in melee combat, and I often defaulted to that. Magic playthroughs, I would often find myself playing as a High Elf. That being said, Oblivion feels designed in a way where specializing is both unnecessary and discouraged. You should be skilled in some form of combat, but the longer you play the game, the more you're going to begin bolstering all aspects of the 3 archetypes the game offers you, those being fighter, thief, and mage. In a way, your Oblivion character will become the best of all 3 almost naturally, as long as you have a basic understanding of how the game's leveling system works. And many people do not in their first playthrough. I don't have much to say about the first-gen process specifically, other than it is lacking in many aspects. Hair selection is few and far between, while facial hair is non-existent. Instead of offering facial hair, the game lets you set facial tones around those areas to emulate things like mustaches or stubble, but it doesn't succeed in the slightest. Skyrim would remedy this later, but even Morrowind had faces to select that had beards. Once your character is created, you'll be plopped into your jail cell with no means of escape. I believe the start of this was meant to showcase the physics possible with the Havoc engine, as there are a few items you can knock around, including shackles hanging on chains from the ceiling. Again, it might not seem that impressive now, but at the time, Half-Life 2 had changed everyone's perceptions of what was possible with physics. Just a few years prior, and now was capitalizing off of that. It's not long before a Dunmer in the cell across from you begins monologuing and goading you. What's impressive about this scene is that the Dunmer will change his dialogue depending on your race and sometimes by your sex. It's always harassment and insults, ending with the idea that you are going to die in here. But the effort to record that many unique lines of dialogue based on your race and how the Dunmer perceives your culture isn't something that you would expect to experience at the time. Oblivion pushes the boundaries of our expectations from the get-go, and this was the point where my interest peaked during my first playthrough. Regardless of what race you've chosen, once the insults are over, a group of 3 blades and the Emperor himself will appear before you. Blades are an elite order of soldiers that are dedicated to the protection of the Emperor. Due to assassins killing the Emperor's sons, Uriel is now on the run, and his group of Blades plan on using a hidden passage that just so happens to be within your cell. You may be wondering why they would place you in such a crucial cell, and that's the exact question one of the Blades has when they see you inside. The best way we could reason it is a slip up with the watch. More accurately, we could call it the intervention of fate, as you are an important aspect of Uriel's story and the battle that is soon to take place. The guards order you to stand at the back of your cell. Hilariously, even though the developers took the time to change the Dunmer's dialogue based on your race, there's plenty of other areas where they didn't take into account other decisions and actions. If you don't move to the back of your cell, nothing happens indefinitely. From an immersion or role-playing sense, this can take you out of the experience as there is no way to continue forward, even though the guards are trying to secure the Emperor from assassins that are searching for them. Time is of the essence, so you'd imagine they would force their way in and incapacitate you if you didn't listen to them. There are plenty of ways that Oblivion is impressive and plenty of ways that it falters. This is one of the latter, but it's minor. I'm not going to berate the developers for not considering every action that the player could take and not adding a contingency for it, but when we are in the intro segment that is already on rails, it would have been interesting to see a few of these more obvious decisions addressed. Maybe they didn't want your character to have the ability to die for fear of turning the player off from the get-go, but you could theoretically punch the Blades enough to get them to attack you and you die anyway. Just something to think about. There are places where more effort was put in than others to help with the overall role-playing experience, and that is realistically all that could be asked considering how much time it would take to cover every option. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it'd require a lot more manpower and hours. I was just playing Prey for the first time recently. It had an ability where you can scan the various enemies in the game to help you unlock the ability to use their powers. One of those powers is a blink ability that leaves a decoy at your last location. If you quickly turn around, you can actually scan the decoy for information on your own character, which is something I never would have expected to be taken into account. The point I'm making is that when a game surprises you by taking these different actions of the player into account, it's very gratifying. And while not possible everywhere, I would have at least liked to see more of it here. Once you finally give in and step back by the window, your character will be locked into place while the guards enter your cell. Uriel will notice you, mentioning that he has seen you before, and he'll have a brief discussion with you where you can ask who he is and even question why you are in jail. He can't give you a straight answer about jail, suggesting that it may be the will of the gods that landed you here, and this further allows you to build the backstory yourself. Soon after, the Blades will open the secret passage that leads into the Imperial sewers. Since there's nothing else for you to do, you can follow after them. I think between the three latest games, that Oblivion's opening is the best overall in terms of the overall experience. Morrowind doesn't really have any opening outside of you creating your character and then going on your way. Skyrim has the action-packed segment where Alduin attacks Helgen, but Oblivion is much more of a slow burn. A mysterious lead-up to the openness of Cyrodiil. Following behind the Blades and the Emperor will have you witness the first of the assassination attempts as members of the Mythic Dawn appear and conjure armor and weapons onto their person to attack, leading to the death of Captain Renault and forcing the Emperor and his guards to continue forward while locking you out from continuing further. There's a few things of note here that I want to discuss. First is that the Mythic Dawn showcase an ability that is something you will have the option of gaining access to later on. The members of the cult are wearing only robes, but when you combat them, they seem to be wearing armor. Once they die, the armor disappears. This is a magical ability within Oblivion. You can learn spells that will let you summon various weapons and armor for limited amounts of time, so that they may give you an edge in combat situations. Generally, anything an NPC can do in the game, you can as well. It's an impressive display of what will await you once you have the freedom to explore. Now, interestingly, the bodies of the Mythic Dawn can be fully looted. Usually it's just a robe and a hood, but sometimes it's a potion or something else that's relatively simple and small. If you've never played a Bethesda game before, you can almost always loot the bodies of any dead character and take everything off of their person. The main way of gaining loot is off the corpses of those you defeat or from various chests found along the way. I didn't talk about it much in Fallout 3 or New Vegas, but it's the same there. For a game like Oblivion that was touting its freedom and ability to do as you please, you may be disappointed to find out that if you loot the corpse of Captain Renault, you cannot take her armor for yourself. You can take her Akaviri katana and steel short sword, as well as various items, but not her armor. While this may feel limiting at first, the reasoning is that the blade armor would probably be fairly overpowered for this point in the game. The developers wanted to limit you on what items you could find throughout this segment so that they could better guide you into learning how to use the various combat styles. Blade's armor would most likely let you steamroll the entire section with little to no issue. You may be asking yourself then, why would they let you take her Akaviri katana? This is specifically a tutorial version of the weapon and has to be given back to one of the blades later on. Akaviri katanas are generally more powerful than the one I found here, much of which may be due to your current stats and less so the weapon. All this to say, I understand why they limit you in these ways. It's necessary for a cleaner player experience, but I enjoy pointing out how glaring these limitations are in a game that is trying its best to hide them in the name of player freedom. With Captain Renault dead and the blades gone with the Emperor, you're once again stuck, but luckily for you, a passage opens up from some loose bricks as rats escape from a tunnel to begin attacking you. Realistically, the assassins would have been too much for you, and it was thanks to the blades being there that you survived. Rats, on the other hand, are no problem at all, and an assortment of rats, zombies, and goblins will act as the combat dummies for the tutorial. With the ability to equip loot, I guess we should talk a bit about the Oblivion character menu system. I don't hate the Oblivion character menu, but I do often use an overhaul mod to change it, and I would have done so here if we didn't need to talk about it. The menu is meant to resemble a journal or clipboard of some sort. You have 4 major categories you can explore through, those being player stats, inventory, magic, and quest/map details. Stout and overall a mess to work your way through if you have an abundance of spells or items in your inventory. Overhaul mods allow for more information to appear on the screen in a more modern way and makes finding things much easier and less time consuming. Say what you will about the old Morrowind menu system and its obtuseness, but at least I could find everything I wanted on a first glance rather than having to work through categories and subcategories just so I could reach the map. Something I'm going to be looking at constantly. A map that you can only view as an elongated rectangle without the ability to zoom in to show the finer details. The category in which the menu is the strongest is most likely the player stats page, as this will rarely change in terms of what is displayed there and what isn't. You get used to the screen and can use it to check progress on your skills and attributes as well as your ranks in various factions and your overall gameplay stats such as days passed, quests completed, etc. An obtuse decision was to make it so that any diseases you can track displayed in the magic tab within the active effects screen. Here you could find you had a debuff and then select it to see what disease was causing it. I would have much rather had a list of contracted diseases either in its own category or fit somewhere within the player status screen. The active effects screen shouldn't be in the magic section, but in the status section instead, and this obtuseness and clutter can lead to unnecessary confusion. Not the end of the world, but one of the many minor annoyances that led to modders completely overhauling the system. As you explore the tunnels within the sewer, you'll fight off various enemies like I mentioned earlier. You'll gain access to melee weapons, as well as a bow and plenty of arrows found around the area. I don't believe using a bow is as busted as in Skyrim, but it's still fairly powerful. On top of all of this, you also have some basic magic spells as well, namely a fireball and a weak healing spell. Unlike Skyrim, you don't equip spells to your hands. Instead, you have a spell slot which can have one active spell at any time. You then use the dedicated spell button on your controller or keyboard to activate it. With all of these options, it's recommended to make use of the quick key system, where an item can be assigned to several number slots. I personally have a sword, shield, bow, some spells, and torches within my quick item arsenal, and yes, I would recommend having torches handy whenever you can. Oblivion isn't as dark as the old prototypes, but it's still worthwhile to help illuminate caves and various other areas so you can find everything hidden within. I'm not looking for intense realism and pitch black caves in these games, but if that's your thing, there's plenty of mods to facilitate that for both Oblivion and Skyrim. One of the major aspects of combat you'll learn about is sneaking. While crouched, you'll have a transparent eye icon surrounding your reticule. If it becomes opaque, it means something has noticed your presence. You can use this to bypass enemies or land stealth attacks for extra damage. Line of sight, lighting, equipment, and whether or not you are walking or running affect how easy you are to see on top of your stealth skill level. Traps are also strewn about the area to help you learn about things like tripwires and pressure plates. To make better use of the physics engine, they even place a pile of logs within that you can push down to kill a couple unexpected goblins. One final mechanic that gets introduced to us is lockpicking. If you are used to Fallout and Skyrim, you may be confused as to what you are looking at, but it isn't that complicated. The lockpicking minigame in Oblivion is much more difficult than in Skyrim or Fallout, but that's only because those versions are so simplistic and easy. In later entries, you just need to position your tools properly and unlock the door. In Oblivion, it's a little more complicated. The difficulty of the lock is dictated by a few factors, including whether it is very easy to very hard tier, on top of your security skill. The tier of the lock will dictate how many tumblers you need to raise and lock into place before the lock will open. These early locks only have 1 or 2 tumblers to worry about, but if you lock one and then mess up the other, all tumblers will fall out of place, forcing you to start over. This is remedied by earning perks via leveling your security skill. Wait, Oblivion has perks? Well, sort of. Every skill can be naturally raised to level 100. Anything below level 25 is considered a novice, but once you hit level 25, you will become an apprentice and gain a new perk. Using security as an example, apprentices gain the ability to keep 1 tumbler locked into place if you fail a lockpicking attempt. After apprentice is journeyman, then expert, and once at level 100, you reach master rank. So you can see how lockpicking will become easier over time. Not only will less tumblers fall as you hit different skill tiers, but your skill level affects the speed of the tumblers, basically dictating how often they will raise fast or slow. I should point out that an item we are going to gain later on is going to completely invalidate this minigame, but we can worry about that later. The point is that you can unlock any lock at any time if you have the picks and skills to do so. Novices can open very hard locks, it just ends up being more difficult to do so. And if you don't want to take part in the minigame, there is an auto unlock attempt that can be tried for as many times as you have lockpicks to break. You'll end up finding your first set of armor as you continue on as well. First a set of leather armor and then a rusty iron set to give you the options between light and heavy, each having their own pros and cons, with light generally allowing you to be more agile and heavy offering more defense at the cost of weight. Shields also count as either heavy or light, so keep that in mind if attempting to level one skill without the other. Once through the caves, you'll find yourself further in the Imperial sewers. Not far off, you can find the Emperor and his entourage, once again getting into a fight with various Mythic Dawn assassins. Once the battle is over, they notice you and suggest killing you since you could be colluding with the assassins. But the Emperor stops them since he believes you to be an important aspect to stopping the Oblivion crisis. Uriel will be discussing the 9 Divines with you as well as other various star signs in the sky.
Я отойду на 3-4 минутки, немножечко разомнусь. Ой, а то что-то реально сон клонит, надо как-то разогнать кровь. I'll be back.
Some will offer passive benefits while others are activated powers. The Atronak, as an example, fortifies your magicka by 150 points and offers 50% spell absorption, but prevents the natural regeneration of magicka that is normally possible. Meanwhile, a sign like the Tower gives you a spell that can be used once per day to open an average level lock or lower, and a power to reflect 5% of damage for 2 minutes. I think every playthrough I always choose the Thief sign as it gives you 10 points in agility, luck, and speed. I haven't gone over the leveling process yet, but 10 points in luck is huge if you are planning on getting it to 100. 30 attribute points in total is just an incredibly powerful start to the game. There's a similar sign known as the Steed that gives 20 points to speed, but you're missing out on 10 additional attribute points and on points being put into luck specifically. Some of these birth signs are more beneficial than others. It seems impossible to balance them all for obvious reasons. Considering most do something completely different from the other, it's really up to your preferred playstyle and what you want to get out of them. The reflect spell you unlock with the tower means you could create spells with reflect damage earlier than is normally possible, since I believe the only way to unlock the ability is within the Shivering Isles. Maybe that's more important to your character than the attribute bonuses. After you've chosen your sign, you'll continue on with the blades as an escort while fighting through a few more ambushes. Eventually you'll reach a locked gate, a dead end, which is quickly pointed out to be a trap. You go to guard the Emperor within the dead end while the blades scout the area, and Uriel informs you that this is where his life will end. He hands you the Amulet of Kings around his neck, which he wants you to understand is of great importance, and asks for it to be taken to Joffrey at Wayne and Priory near the city of Coral. Joffrey alone knows of a bastard son of Uriel's, making that son the last heir of the Septim line. It's important for the amulet to be delivered to the heir so that he can stop the crisis that is about to befall Cyrodiil. As Uriel finishes explaining this to you, a secret passage opens and a scripted event you can't intervene in shows an assassin emerge before killing the Emperor in front of you. Again, for a game boasting its freedom, these events you have no ability to affect are very apparent when they happen. I don't expect the Emperor to have the possibility of being saved, and I don't know what a better option would have been. It's just an observation of how glaring these aspects can be. With the Emperor dead and the assassins fought off, Boris will approach to mourn Uriel. Glenroy, the other blade, unfortunately died in combat during the last battle. If you search his person, you will again find you have no means of taking his equipment aside from his blade. Boris is an interesting character just in how gullible he must be to those around him. When he approaches you over the death of the Emperor, he'll ask why you are holding the Amulet of Kings, and you can inform him that Uriel gave it to you to take to Joffrey. If I was in Boris's shoes, I'm not sure I would believe it. Maybe it's the mention of Joffrey that really seals the deal for him, as you would only know of him from the mouth of Uriel himself. What's important about this conversation is when Boris hands you the key to the sewers and tells you where to find Joffrey. He'll mention some goblins and rats further on, but he believes they will be no trouble for you, believing you to be a talented insert class name here. This is because the race and skills you gained working up to this point have Boris select a specific class for you for players that don't want to choose their own. But don't worry, you can just choose any of the classes that are available from the list, or better yet, make your own. Classes are not as important in Oblivion as they are in other games, kind of. Realistically, they mean very little in terms of difference, as they just dictate your major skills, specializations, and favorite attributes. These are all things that will matter less and less as you progress, although major skills are how you level up. And with that, it's time to discuss the most infamous mechanic in Oblivion, the leveling system. I highly recommend making a class in this game so you can better fine-tune your experience. Some of the classes available to you are simply not optimal in terms of the bonuses you receive when leveling up. When playing through Oblivion, you will have an assortment of 7 major skills. These skills get a starting bonus and are used to determine when you level up. To level up in Oblivion, you must reach 10 points of progress within your major skills. This means either leveling up one major skill 10 times or leveling several by different amounts until you reach the total of 10. Sounds simple enough, right? It's not. Oblivion is incredibly difficult for some players, sometimes through no real fault of their own, although I guess it depends if you consider ignorance to be their fault. The world around you in Oblivion is dictated by your level. The items you find, the enemies you'll run into, and the gear bandits and marauders are carrying are based on tiers that are decided by your level. Basically, the world of Oblivion levels up with you, and this can be good or bad for a variety of reasons. Let's say there's a static set of armor you want to retrieve. You may not feel inclined to go and grab it until you reach a certain level, because if you retrieve it early, it won't be as powerful as it could have been, and it will stop progression once you receive it. This means you are punished for getting certain powerful items early on. It's not entirely noticeable to a first-time player, but to someone looking to squeeze more out of their experience, it can be hindered by this mechanic. On the other hand, you can start getting more powerful gear from the enemies around you. Bandits can carry Daedric or glass weapons, and marauders may be wearing Daedric armor, and you can collect these off of their corpses. If you haven't played Oblivion before, you may not realize how absurd that sounds though. A marauder having any Daedric equipment is a ludicrous thought. Once you understand the concept of the Oblivion Gates, the Daedra, and just how dangerous they are, to find yourself traveling through Cyrodiil constantly running into individuals wearing this incredibly rare and powerful armor makes less and less sense. Regardless of the nonsensical nature of it, the point I'm making is that it becomes easier for you to obtain more powerful gear at higher levels, so there are benefits to leveling up. However, I just mentioned that major skills are what level you up. Let's say that you create a custom class with no combat major skills. All of your major skills are instead things like armorer, mercantile, speech, etc. You still have all of your combat skills, they're just minor so they don't receive a bonus. But for the sake of the argument, let's say you never level them up. This is an extreme example, but imagine a character who reached level 20 off of these skills with no combat progress. You now exist in an incredibly hostile world for a character of your build. It would be virtually impossible to defend yourself from the creatures outside the safety of the various cities, at least until you spend some time addressing your combat flaws or lowering the game's difficulty. Like I said, that's an extreme example, but believe me when I say that it doesn't take this extreme case to experience these problems. Many players unfamiliar with the obtuse leveling system will find themselves falling further and further behind the enemies of Cyrodiil, and this in turn makes enemies feel like damage sponges that can one-shot you. Basically, everything becomes a walking tank. This isn't just because you didn't level up combat skills though, this is because you didn't take part in something known as efficient leveling. Now, dislike the leveling system all you want. I think once you understand it, it's both fair and an interesting way to keep tabs on the skills and overall usefulness of your character. That's because every time you level up, you get to choose 3 attributes to apply bonuses to. But what you may notice on a level up is that those bonuses are different. Where one attribute has a +1 bonus, another attribute may have a +5. The answer is that every skill can be placed into a specific attribute category. Blade, blunt, and hand-to-hand are assigned to strength, while alteration, destruction, and restoration are assigned to willpower. Unfortunately, nothing is set to luck, and that is the reason that it can only ever be boosted by 1 per level up and makes it super annoying. The bonus that is applied to the attributes is based on how many skills within its category were raised before the character leveled up. 0 skill points offer a +1 bonus, 1 to 4 offers a +2, 5 to 7 a +3, 8 to 9 a +4, and 10 skill points will bestow a +5 bonus. Now you may be scratching your head here. If 10 skill points are needed to get the best bonus, but you level up after every 10 skills, how do some of these bonuses have +2 or 3 while another has +5 at the same time? The answer is minor skills. Minor skills are still assigned to a category, but they are not related to leveling your character. Only major skills affect that. This is where efficient leveling comes into play. To be as optimal as possible, you as a player need to keep track of what skills you are leveling up and their categories. If you want 3 separate attributes to have a +5 bonus on level up, you need to make sure 3 separate attribute categories gain 10 skills total, either major or minor ones. By doing this and making sure you level up combat skills to stay powerful, you will quickly begin to move ahead of enemy progression with each level. Players that level like this can become powerhouses very easily, but there's some drawbacks. For one, this knowledge of how leveling works can consume you as a player. If we gain enough major skills to level up, your minor skills that you gain before sleeping to confirm the level will not continue to contribute to the bonus of that level, but instead the bonus of the next one. Additionally, if you are gaining skills in an ability you don't plan on selecting on level up, those skills end up being essentially wasted. Attribute points for the future. This can cause a form of leveling paralysis, where you don't actually play the game and experience the content because you don't want to waste skills. You're stuck constantly training until you're max level or until you get burnt out, and by that point you've missed out on experiencing the world getting stronger alongside you, and you have no leveling to look forward to while you actually play through the game. Now you don't need to do this, and I in no way suggest doing this if you want to have an enjoyable experience. Efficient leveling of that magnitude is not necessary to keep ahead of the enemies, but having the knowledge of how the system works and keeping certain aspects of this in your mind can help you play the game while still managing to get important bonuses. Let's use my gameplay style as an example. I personally generally like to max out endurance as soon as possible because every level up rewards maximum health points at 10% of the value of your current endurance. The sooner your endurance is at 100, the sooner you are gaining 10 health points per level up, and that is very important in terms of survivability. So generally what I do is I make sure that I get armor, block, and heavy armor to increase before I fully level up so that I receive these bonuses. If I waste some other skills and bonuses, it's no problem. Generally speaking, I prefer to have 2 abilities that have a +5 bonus, and then the third goes into luck since it never gets a bonus anyway. It makes focusing on attributes a bit easier, but even if my secondary attribute doesn't get a +5 bonus, I don't see it as the end of the world. As long as endurance gets it, I'm happy, and once maxed out, I focus on something else. This allows me to take part in content while being aware of my skills that I am leveling. You might think that this system impedes on your preferred playstyle. If you want to wear light armor, but heavy armor is necessary for endurance, what do you do? There's a few options here. For one, there's trainers in the game. Back in Morrowind, trainers could be used to level all the way to 100 without limits as long as the trainer had the relevant rank to train you. It's a great way to cause this paralysis effect I mentioned previously. It's very easy to make money in Morrowind, so you may find yourself just working through menus for hours instead of actually playing the game. Oblivion tries to remedy this by only allowing you to train 5 times per level regardless of which skill you're training. Trainers slightly remedy the problem, but they don't fully fix it, so what else can we do? This is where we double back to character creation. The reason it is so important to make your own class or make an informed decision in choosing a class is because we can select what our major skills are going to be. By choosing our major skills, we can select things we don't use often and that do not passively level up. If you have acrobatics as a major skill, it would level up passively just by walking around, and you would gain levels faster than is desirable. If you set the majority of your major skills to abilities you won't use often, you can wear and use whatever items you want and not worry about forcing a level up by raising their skills. Only when you want to level up would you need to focus on those other major skills. Don't get me wrong, this is far from a perfect system. The fact that I have been explaining the concept of leveling this long shows just how obtuse it is. Even if you set up your skills properly and play properly, many other players are not going to do this, and it is going to cause them to fall behind and have a worse overall experience, forcing them to turn the game difficulty down. It's not a good system, and it can punish you for playing the game as the developers expect you to play it, by going around and exploring rather than keeping track of every skill all the time. There's something wrong here, and it's understandable why so many people hate the game's leveling system, and I am not going to defend it. What I will say is that with just a basic understanding of the system, a custom class, and a bit of conscious thought involving your skills while playing, you should be able to create a character
Такой
that will
вкусный лайн, аж
game world, but
приятно смотреть за процессом. Доброго вечерочка, денечка, приятного рисования. Спасибо! Спасибо! Этот, борюсь со сном. С сонливостью, точнее.
Of course, that's a whole metagaming topic that the typical player won't be dealing with, so I'm only mentioning it offhand. You could even make a powerhouse level 1 character by making all of your combat skills minor and never leveling a major skill, allowing you to steamroll everything. Classes have 3 specializations: combat, magic, and stealth. Each of these specializations has a set of skills that will gain a +5 bonus, and all of the listed skills will level up faster as well. This can be used to your advantage if you are making some key skills minor instead of major. You also need to choose 2 favored attributes that will add +5 to each selection. Again, I go with endurance for my health bonus, and I go for luck because it's the slowest to max out. Any bonuses to luck are worthwhile. Each attribute affects you differently. Strength affects encumbrance, fatigue, and melee damage as an example. Endurance also affects fatigue as well as maximum health per level up, as I mentioned previously. Luck is special and it affects everything in the game. Behind the scenes, all of your skills are modified by using an equation I'm not going to get into. You always start with 50 luck, which means it doesn't
пришлось на
affect you
перерыве
at
на
all.
работе уходить из дома за энергосом. Еще погодка такая дождливая, работы ема в сон вгоняет. Oh man.
So if you had 100 luck, your skills would have a hidden 20-point bonus. Luck also affects the health of the gladiators in the arena, as well as the chance of a specific dagger instant killing an enemy. Once the class is created, exit, Boris will stay to guard the Emperor's body and send you on your way. What follows is another short dungeon segment, and when you will get hit with the classic barrage of Bethesda DLC notifications as everything begins to activate. As you make your way to the exit, the game will give you one last chance to change anything you don't like about your character. If you want, I never use this mechanic. Once finished, you can exit the sewers and finally take your first glimpse of Cyrodiil. If this is your first time playing an Elder Scrolls game and you don't really know what you're doing, I think the beginning moments of exiting the sewers are fantastic, and you may truly feel like you can go off and do anything without focusing on the main quest. If you're looking for a more thorough role-playing experience, or you played the games in the past, this may be more difficult. It's been made very clear to you as the character that you have to get the Amulet of Kings to Joffrey as soon as possible, else who knows what could happen. Mechanically, you have all the time in the world. The state of Oblivion only moves when you do, and it's the main story quest that is necessary for the major events of the story to affect everything around you. From a player sense, you may want to go off and explore, take part in factions and side quests, and see what Oblivion has to offer. But from a role-playing sense, from the railway that is the main quest because of the importance of the events that you are trying to prevent at all times. There is very rarely a chance to breathe during the main story. There's always something that needs to get done, and it's always of utmost importance that it happens immediately. There are a few chances to take a natural break from completing everything, sure, but when the Oblivion games are littered around Cyrodiil, you always have this creeping feeling in the back of your mind that you're both wasting time and probably getting people killed by not focusing on the events that matter. While getting the amulet to Joffrey is more important, I believe that the start of the game, as you exit the sewers, is still one of the better opportunities for you to begin your exploration. In fact, I highly recommend not delivering the amulet for some time, and I equally suggest staying away from Kvatch as well. We'll get to Kvatch a bit later, but the biggest issue with it is that whether you are taking part in the main storyline or not, reaching Kvatch starts its own dire questline that is hard to pull away from. Obviously, if you're a new player, you shouldn't worry about this. It's best to experience Oblivion as it feels natural to you. I know that when I first played, I tried to complete anything I ran into without a care for the main scenario, but I also then bum rushed the entire storyline and got it out of the way fairly quickly. The way I play Elder Scrolls and Fallout games has changed drastically from when I was younger, and I think a big part of that is that I learned how mediocre a lot of these main storylines are in comparison to the side quests and exploration that you don't get by sticking to the main path. From my personal viewpoint, the best way to play Elder Scrolls games is to play through the storyline to a point and then ignore it for quite a while, maybe revisiting it every so often in Morrowind, since Morrowind facilitates giving you breaks to do so. But in Oblivion, the only important aspect of the main storyline to me is unlocking the ability to traverse through Oblivion gates. Far from the best content the game has to offer, but a means of unlocking some very powerful items and effects, as we will see later. Off script, but I was thinking about how New Vegas most likely does this better by having a lot of this side content tied into the necessities of the main storyline a bit later on. The glimpse of the outdoors informs you that the game wants you to explore. It just feels like conflicting design philosophies in terms of what the developer wants the player to do. They want you to explore, but they want you hooked on the main quest because they think side quests are filler that detract from the overall experience. Yet once we exit, the first thing we see is an alien ruin directly in front of us. Who isn't thinking about exploring that the moment they see it on their first playthrough? If you turn around, you're faced with the Imperial City, one of the grandest and most detailed locations in the game. How could you not want to check it out? Just don't forget that you have to deliver the amulet, else the world will end or something. Maybe that's not fair. I don't think your character understands the gravity of the situation just yet, and again, that's why I think this is one of the perfect times to take a look around and get your bearings. And that's what we will be doing, exploring around a bit, treading the natural path I found myself taking on my own previous endless playthroughs, and that means heading towards the Imperial City and seeing what this giant beacon of civilization has to offer. If you take a look at your world map, one of the first things you may notice is that several locations are already unlocked for you to fast travel to. I cannot begin to express how awful a decision I found this to be. I have said this in the past, but I am not someone inherently against fast travel. I appreciate when a game like Morrowind offers an in-universe means of fast travel, but I am perfectly content with the more popular mechanic of teleporting to key locations from your map. The one thing I believe is important to set as a rule is that the player must reach the location before being able to freely travel to it, or have some in-universe means of facilitating this function. To make it possible for every city to be easily accessible right from the get-go removes the sense of need to explore for the player. Sure, they'll have to walk to other unexplored areas and in turn will get to experience the world a bit better, but a huge amount of the world that you would normally have to traverse is now essentially optional. Now, before I get comments saying don't like it, don't use it, I'm again stating that I am not against fast travel as a mechanic. I do like it, and I do use it. I'm playing Tears of the Kingdom right now, and I'm using it plenty, trust me. My issue is for players new to the games. It's a design flaw. Players that don't consciously decide to not use the system may not realize what they are missing out on. Someone may exit the sewers and immediately teleport to Coral, potentially bypassing dungeons they may have explored otherwise or towns they may have visited. It's a poor design choice because it is removing potential. The potential to find something along the way that interests you.
Потому что я, блин, я не хочу это лайнить.
Sure, use the mechanic, because you unlocked it by making that journey. Or do what Skyrim did and create a middle ground by adding carriages that can take you to the key cities of the province. Then it's a conscious in-universe decision to take shortcuts. Maybe your character doesn't want to walk across the entire landmass to get to Solitude, so they take the carriage. Same with the Silt Striders in Morrowind, it's more conscious. Unlocking these shortcuts from the get-go is just a missed opportunity because Oblivion and games like it generally facilitate them really well. Fast travel is at its best when you don't feel compelled to use it after all. If the journey from point A to point B is interesting enough, you won't always feel hassled by it, and fast travel may become an afterthought. But by offering it from the get-go, people won't get to see if that journey appeals to them. And I believe in Oblivion it would, with all of the locations along the way to explore and towns to find that may have quests you want to take part in. Assuming you head straight to the Imperial City from where you started, you'll probably reach the Market District first. The Imperial City itself is broken up into multiple districts that include the Market, Arena, Elven Gardens, Temple, and Talos Plaza, as well as the waterfront for ships, the Imperial Prison, the Arcane University, and the Imperial Palace, which stands in between everything. Its circular and interconnected design means you can work your way around and through the city at your leisure, or use the fast travel points that are already unlocked for some reason. It's one of the best cities, not just in Oblivion, but within Elder Scrolls in general, maybe within Bethesda products. In fact, I was disappointed that Skyrim didn't have anything that I considered an equivalent to it, but it's understandable why. Cyrodiil is the capital of the Empire, and in the dead center of it is their capital city. It's so grand on purpose because that's what the Empire does. Makes large, grand structures whether they are welcome there or not. I suppose Solitude is a close second in terms of some of my favorite city designs, but nothing holds a candle to the cities and towns of Cyrodiil in terms of aesthetic, at least for me personally. The design also allows the developers to break up the city into various cells or sections. At the time, it would have been difficult to have the entire city open in one fluid area considering how dense and detailed it was. By breaking it up, the load is lessened for an already fragile game that desperately needs it. Maybe Elder Scrolls 6 will finally offer open cities without the need for mods. I don't have much to say about the Marketplace District specifically. It serves a purpose, and that purpose is selling you goods while feeling like a realistic depiction of a market. The Imperial City is an area of wealth. Almost every merchant operates out of a fairly large structure that in turn acts as their home. Speaking of homes, every town allows you to buy housing. We'll discuss that concept a bit later when I actually make some money in this game and can afford them. In terms of merchants, almost everyone has a specialty. You have a few inns, a weapon shop, armor shop, magic books, clothing, etc. There's some overlap here and there, but the idea is that the market district has all of your basic needs covered, and this in turn, with the centralized location of the Imperial City, makes it the perfect hub for the majority of your adventure. All roads lead to the Imperial City, just like all roads lead to Grand Soaring, and you'll find yourself revisiting here over and over again. That was a Dragon's Dogma reference. I have a Dragon's Dogma video you should go watch. Really good. We'll be stopping by the market district constantly, to the point that I would say it is one of the most familiar districts for players, second only to the waterfront, which we're still a ways away from checking out. Another feat of design is watching the NPCs go about their daily lives. I mentioned that the Radiant AI system had to be limited to prevent utter chaos, but that doesn't mean the NPCs do absolutely nothing. They can still interact with the world and with each other. In fact, you will have the opportunity to listen to the notorious Oblivion NPC conversations that have been popularized over the years. These conversations aren't for nothing either. Many things you listen in on may add a topic of conversation to your dialogue window that will allow you to look into something further and potentially start a quest. I mentioned earlier that Oblivion feels like you are walking in a dream, and I stand by that.
Надеюсь, это не будет смотреться отличающимся, типа так-то в остальном лайн сделаю. Вот волосы. Нет, я не буду.
It's a weird feeling, but a comfortable one. I don't know how to better describe it, but maybe you know what I mean. Beside the market district is the arena district, and this is where we're going to be spending a lot of our time for the next while. That's because the arena is one of the first faction quests I expect people to take part in due to its close vicinity to where we start after the sewers. I think many consider the arena to be one of the more boring and uninspired quest lines in the game, but I disagree. Emil Poliarulo, who designed the quest for the arena faction, is a point of contention in the series as a whole. Many praise his work in quest design for Oblivion's Dark Brotherhood faction, but others tend to lambast his writing and lore of these factions, partially due to his retconning of aspects that were established in previous games. Still, I believe there is a lot of charm within the arena quest line, even if much of it is illogical and repetitive. The arena shows the growth of your reputation and the respect towards you from the individuals within, and we'll explore all of that shortly. Before that, let's discuss the concept of the arena as a spectator. By the entrance to the arena proper, you can find Dolan, who will allow you to bet on either the blue or yellow team based on who you believe will win the match. I pointed this out earlier, but the higher your luck, the better your chances with betting, since combatants' health is affected by the luck stat. There's a little reason to actually watch and participate in these fights as a spectator outside of a role-playing aspect, but it does manage to make the game world feel more alive. I've also said this in previous videos, but every role-playing game should have an arena. I've never seen a time when an inclusion like an arena has been anything but a net positive. Always add them. Always, always, always. After watching a match, you can talk to Dolan to receive your winnings if the bet ends up in your favor. Beside him is a very hard chest that has a replenishing 500 gold within. This is very easy to obtain after you receive a certain Daedric artifact, so it's a great way to get a little 500 gold bonus whenever you are in the area. Beside the exterior of the arena, you can spot some combatants training in hand-to-hand combat. If you watch them long enough, you'll gain +5 to your unarmed skill as a one-time bonus. This is repeated again later when we make it to Cloud Ruler Temple. There's some leather bands and a chest beside Brandwind here that are worth stealing, as they offer +20 to unarmed. Enter the Bloodworks, specifically the blue team's Bloodworks, which is confusing as there is no area for the yellow team that is accessible despite what the game implies during matches. It's confusing because when you are in the arena during combat, you will find that the yellow team combatant comes from their own training area with their own Blade Master, as is implied in dialogue, but based on the designs of the interior cells, there is no way to reach it. The door to your left of the entrance leads to the blue team's Bloodworks, and the door to the right leads to the spectator's seating. Based on what is presented to us, there is no way the area for the yellow team exists, yet we know that it does, as Owen, the Blade Master that gives you your matches, is clearly assigned to the blue team. To make matters worse, the only yellow team member we ever see outside of the arena and within the Bloodworks is the yellow team champion. Everyone else within is considered or implied to be I'd argue that the champion is implied to have been blue team as well before reaching his current title. A logical arena setup aside, to begin fighting you need to talk to the Blade Master Owen, who facilitates all of the matches. Owen will scoff at the idea of you entering as a combatant, and this is most likely the first or second place someone will point out to you another aspect of the game that developers either didn't think to include or just decided not to. No matter what your accomplishments are in the game, whether you become the champion of Cyrodiil or the guildmaster of various factions, certain quests will not take this into account and have the NPCs treat you like nobody they have ever heard of. That doesn't mean that the developers haven't implemented some aspects of this though. Plenty of people will stop on the street to point out you are the grand champion or the hero of Kavach, and when we begin to close key Oblivion gates around the cities, many individuals will mention it and even thank us for how we saved them. It's not all bad, and the effort was put into the mechanic somewhat. It could just be better by including extra dialogue for quest lines where your title may turn out to be important. The developers even retroactively did something similar to this with the Sheogorath Daedric quest after releasing the Shivering Isles, and I'll bring it up once we get there. Regardless, at the moment, Owen is justified in his perception of us. We are just nobody, and we are most likely going to get our ass handed to us. I mentioned that most people probably take part in the arena early, but taking part in the arena early is not necessarily the best practice. Some of the health pools of these characters that you will be going up against are fairly high for the equipment that you will have fresh out of the sewers, and for that reason, it's going to feel like an uphill battle with plenty of potion drinking and heal spell spamming. By the way, if you hold the shield button and hold the cast button, you'll spam spells faster for some reason. I don't know why, but I'm pointing it out to save a life for those in need. Despite the challenge, it is still possible to make do with what we have from the get-go. A good example of how to utilize everything within your arsenal. That being said, please consider getting an enchanted elemental weapon before taking part. It'll be really worthwhile in terms of time spent. So after Owen gets his laughs in, he'll allow us to participate in our first battle after giving us the rank of Pit Dog. You can see your rank on your character sheet in the menu. For the most part, each rank is going to consist of 3 battles, and each of those battles will pay out based on your rank. For example, the first 2 battles will pay 50 gold, and the third will pay 100 because you just reached the next rank. So you'll get 2 payouts of 50, then 3 of 100, then 3 of 150, etc. until we start dealing with hero rank. The rules of the arena are that there are no rules, but also that there are some rules. You can fight however you want in the battlefield, but you need to be wearing your team raiment, which is enchanted armor that takes up the majority of your armor slots, except your head. You cannot start a match without wearing a raiment. It is mandatory, and removing the raiment in battle will actually disqualify you from the match. This can be used to skip a single match if you want, but I don't suggest it. You're missing out on skill building, and you're one slip up away from being permanently removed from the faction entirely. Most factions will have rules that if you break will lead to you getting kicked out, but you generally get the opportunity to work your way back in through a small quest to regain their favor, at least once. This is not true for the arena. Believe it or not, I didn't even know this was possible until I started writing this script because I never thought of removing my armor mid-combat. But yeah, if you get kicked out, that's it. So make sure to keep your raiment on at all times, else face the wrath of Owen, who will laugh at you. Laugh you out of the Bloodworks. Something else to keep in mind is that you should talk to the Blue Gladiator and Yellow Team Champion whenever you rank up. Each of them will have something new to say to you with each new rank, commenting on your progress. We'll discuss Agranac, the Grand Champion, and the battle matron after a few matches. For now, let's dust off that old battle raiment and head into our first match. As you make your way to the door that leads to the main fighting area of the arena, you hear the cheers of the spectators from behind it, a small but nice detail I like to point out. The arena always felt very cozy to me as a kid, despite it being where people go to murder or, get murdered if you're Agranac. As you exit out into the ring, you will be impeded by a gate until the announcer finishes introducing the two of you. These monologues vary with each match and can overstay their welcome or end almost immediately. It really depends on what you're fighting at the time. The first two matches aren't anything special. You fight a Wood Elf followed by an Imperial, and they both use a sword and a shield. I think the major differences are that one uses light armor and the other uses heavy. You'll quickly learn what I meant about health pools if you're going into this with the beginner gear from the sewers, but it's not impossible. Think of it as a good opportunity to raise some endurance skills. That's what I do anyway. To be honest, the entirety of the arena is a great way to prepare for the rest of the game as long as you do it efficiently. And I know, efficient leveling can be very grating on the player experience, and again, I agree with you. But this is what you're given, and you might as well make the most out of it, else suffer the consequences. The third fight is against an Argonian with a bow, and my god, do these guys move like lightning. Any marksman I fight runs at max speed away from me while facing me until they get themselves trapped by the yellow team door. If you really want to infuse the mechanics of this game, stand in such a way that the marksman will miss you by having their arrows deflect into the wall. You can then pick these up, I assume, an infinite amount of times. However, it's not worth the amount of time you have to put into getting a decent amount. Just a cool little aspect of arrows in the game. I'm pretty sure there's actually a chance to have arrows that hit you automatically end up in your inventory as well. I don't know if you have ever looked at your character after getting hit with an arrow, but it's not pretty. They'll fully penetrate your chest, legs, wrist, and face, but somehow we just keep trucking along, and it's the same for the other combatants. Every time you defeat an opponent, you'll head back into the Bloodworks and be able to use a nearby basin of water full of blood and goop to clean your wounds. I wouldn't personally recommend trying this in real life, but mechanically it fully restores all of your health, magicka, and fatigue. Fatigue is a big aspect of Oblivion, by the way. Running inhibits your fatigue, attacking drains your fatigue, and power attacks and jumping do the same. The lower your stamina bar, the more fatigued you are, and this can affect melee damage as well as sneaking and pickpocketing. Yeah, you can pickpocket in this game. I'm not going to get into it. I guess I haven't mentioned the combat in detail yet. Oblivion was a departure from Morrowind in that there is no chance of missing your opponent outside of you physically missing them with your blade. In Morrowind, your chance to hit was mainly affected by your skill with the weapon, but this has been removed in future releases to offer a more streamlined and intuitive experience. Now, when you hit an enemy with your sword, you actually hit them every time. Just make sure that they don't dodge you or borderline teleport away from you like that Argonian we just killed. I believe blocking was chance-based in Morrowind as well if you had a shield equipped, but it is now an active ability in Oblivion. In fact, you can block with weapons as well if you don't have a shield equipped. Since bows are two-handed, you can have a shield equipped, but it won't be utilized in combat until you sheath the bow, meaning that you will try to block with the bow instead, which is less effective. For melee combat specifically, your skill level with your weapon will unlock new power attack abilities as you reach certain tiers. You unlock the ability to power attack as a novice, and then unlock stronger power attacks with each tier that have their own effects. Standing power attacks do more damage, left and right power attacks can disarm, backwards attacks can knock down, and forward attacks can cause paralysis. Magic we're going to get into later, so we'll hold off on explaining that for now. Back with Owen, he'll be surprised that we have managed to survive this long, and while he doesn't like us yet, he will begin to warm up to us. In fact, after our fourth match, he'll start offering advice regularly and begin to really be in our corner. That's what I love about the arena. It's a simplistic faction with repetitive tasks, but that's what an arena is. You go in, you fight, you repeat, and by continuing to succeed, we end up building friendships and respect with Owen and with the blue team gladiator. Not with the yellow team champion though. She never learns to respect us until she's at the pointy end of our blade. With your first 3 matches out of the way, you can talk to Owen to be promoted to brawler rank, the second of 9 possible ones to unlock. By the way, if you didn't realize it or have never seen it before, the posters for the arena are based off of the cover art for the original Elder Scrolls game, Elder Scrolls Arena. Now that we're a brawler, we've taken our first real step of becoming a respectable arena combatant. Isabelle, the battle matron for the Great Prince, won't talk to us about anything important, and her dialogue won't change per rank, at least not until we are champions. That's because the battle matron works solely with the Grand Champion of the arena. If you're wondering who the Great Prince is, aka the Grand Champion, it's Agranak Gromalog over here, and we're about to start talking to him. Before that, Isabelle, Owen, and some of the other combatants will often mention the name Gaiden Shinji. They referred to him as if he were one of the 9 divines, like by Shinji or for Shinji's sake. That's because Gaiden Shinji was the original Blade Master and creator of the arena. He was considered a hero of his time, and everyone within the arena holds great respect for him. I believe Shinji actually makes an appearance in the MMO Elder Scrolls Online, but I still have yet to be able to make it through the opening tutorial of that game. Maybe that'll change. Maybe. Anyway, you can find Agranak in the same spot all the time, attacking a hanging slab of wood. He's cordial enough, mostly because he doesn't seem to think too highly of himself and because he doesn't look down on you like Owen or the Yellow Team Champion. Yeah, Champion and Grand Champion are different ranks here, and only the current champ can challenge Agranak. If you talk to him, he'll inform you that he took the title the Great Prince because Agranak is of noble blood. His mother was an orc, but she became intimate with Lord Leviticus, an imperial noble. Agranak believes that Leviticus's wife found out about the affair and threatened to kill the prince and his mother, forcing them to flee. Now Agranak wishes to find proof of his heritage so he can obtain the title of noble that he feels he deserves. His mother passed recently and gave Agranak a key that would unlock the truth at the fort known as Crowhaven. I guess since he's so busy being the Grand Champion in the Imperial City, he hasn't had the time to go himself, and so Agranak asks you to go look for the proof he desires. This is probably the first real side quest I ever took part in when I first played Oblivion on the PS3. It's a simple enough task. Agranak has a key to a location that he marks on our map, and we need to head over there. This is the first point of contention you may hear about when discussing Oblivion or Skyrim quests. Back in Morrowind, you didn't have quest markers. If you were told to get something, meet someone, or go somewhere, you had to figure out how to get there yourself. Generally, you could get directions, and those directions would be filled into your journal, or you could ask around about how to reach different settlements. The idea for a lot of people that enjoyed that quest design, myself included, is that it is more open-ended and player-conscious. It requires the player to be aware and thorough in their gameplay, willing to read all dialogue, and even search through various books for answers they are seeking. Waypoints remove an aspect of that mechanic, and so you'll often have people complain about them as you may end up following the compass rather than following paths of the game world.
Oh my god.
It's like using the GPS in Grand Theft Auto.
Nice.
Sometimes you're playing a top-down mini-map driving simulator rather than driving a car in the game proper and seeing all of the scenery and density of Los Santos, if that makes sense. It pulls you up a level from the game world and simplifies the gameplay experience. There are definitely some aspects of waypoints that I believe detract from the overall experience, but there are other aspects that add to it. Not everyone playing an Elder Scrolls game wants to search so thoroughly through such a large game to find the information they desire. If we continue to compare it to Morrowind, generally speaking, locations still get marked on your map when the individual talking to you knows where you are going. There's just no waypoint to constantly guide you. Instead, you have to check your map and try to reason which way you are going. This is great if you're in the mood for it, and not so great if you aren't. The waypoint system ends up being a necessary evil to sell more copies to a wider audience, and you can take that as you will. Some of these design choices are to facilitate more people feeling comfortable playing the game, and I understand why a Morrowind player may be disappointed with this shift in design. I am disappointed with similar design choices in Monster Hunter World and Rise in comparison to past games in the series. I think what's important to understand is that waypoints become somewhat second nature to you in these games over time. It becomes a point where there is a waypoint on your compass and you understand the direction you are going, but you may find yourself exploring and observing the area around you more easily. Jumping off the path to check a cave or town or ruin, and you do need to be on guard since you could be ambushed at any moment.
Привет! Привет, Арина, how are you doing? Добро пожаловать.
out of them, and I understand that mindset. But I don't think the waypoint
Ой, блин,
Oblivion
надо немножко встать, а то
ruins
опять.
that because the
Тут
series
опять
still
что-то неудобно
managed enough to
становится.
facilitate you
Немного
exploring
разомнусь.
whatever it is you need. It's not like this concept is fully removed from the game either. There are still quests where the goal or location you need to reach isn't made immediately clear to you. Knights of the Nine is the first example off the top of my head, as you have to make a pilgrimage at the start of the quest line and you are not guided along the path with waypoints. The waypoint system isn't perfect, and it does remove some aspects of gameplay from past games, so it's your personal opinion as a fan of the series how much it bothers you, or whether it bothers you at all. I feel that will partially be dependent on where you started out in the series. I came to appreciate what Morrowind had to offer after playing Oblivion, and I could see how Oblivion would have benefited from some of those design choices. It's like when we get to Crowhaven and read a required journal. We don't actually need to read anything inside of it ourselves. Opening the book is enough to continue the quest line and reveal the secret we are about to learn. There's no extra steps the player needs to take, and that may disappoint some players who are used to doing more. Go to this fort, go into the secret area, interact with this book with a waypoint directly above it, and then report back. That's the gist of this and many other quest lines, but it isn't as bad as I'm making it sound, because you have the opportunity to do more. You have the opportunity to observe more. You don't actually need to read the journal, but you can read it, and your experience would be better for it. Oblivion is full of things like that, little tidbits of information that enrich the narrative and the lore of those surrounding you. You can find a scrap of paper that shows Branwen is Owen's illegitimate daughter. You can learn that Owen asked Isabel to marry him and she turned him down. If you take the time, you can see that while the developers have facilitated easier exploration for a wider audience, those that want to go the extra mile are rewarded with a more enriched experience. So Crowhaven is our next destination and our first real outing into the world of Cyrodiil. The issue is that it is near both Anvil and Kavach. Normally I like to travel to these locations without fast travel the first time I go to them, but since we are bypassing Kavach, I only ended up traveling normally part way. Once I neared Kavach and did some exploring in caves and ruins, I ended up fast traveling to Anvil for the sake of this playthrough. Normally I probably have just hit Kavach and let what happens happen. This is a good time to point out that exploring the various caves and mines can be a rewarding experience. You'll find various enemies and loot within that makes the exploration worthwhile, but that's about it. Oblivion suffers from all of its caves looking incredibly similar and providing similar experiences, to the point that people may find themselves so exhausted with this aspect of the game that they just focus on the main quest line right away and in turn get burnt out. A lot of these dungeon runs are going to feel the same, and that naturally gets very boring. One of the weakest parts of the Oblivion experience, if you ask me. Still, Crowhaven isn't too bad. It's a rundown fort, but it isn't that big within. What's interesting about it is that you could explore Crowhaven at any time, but you wouldn't have full access to it without getting the key from Agranac. I have never liked the idea of certain doors being locked by a key that is necessary to obtain, considering there is a lock-picking mechanic in the game. You know, a game like Resident Evil, sure, but in Oblivion, I don't know, I'm not a big fan. A magically sealed door, sure, but a door that requires a key should be one I can pick. You can tell the developers use this to control progression somewhat. Sometimes they don't want you going somewhere until you're required to do so, and this is a missed opportunity. Quests are more interesting when you can start them at any point. Imagine we explored Crowhaven and found the journal I mentioned, but we had no idea what to do with it. Imagine we got a quest description that explained someone may be interested in the journal, but we wouldn't know who for sure. Then when we meet the Grey Prince, we could reason that the journal belonged to his father, and we can hand it to him right away to his surprise. Those are some of the most rewarding experiences in games like these, but it feels like Oblivion actively fights against making them possible sometimes. To complete a quest, you usually have to start it in a specific way, and there's no way to do anything related to the quest until it is started. At least usually. There may be some outliers I am failing to remember that I will notice later on in this playthrough. Crowhaven is a simplistic dungeon to explore. There's some skeletons near the entrance, followed by some wolves within. As you get further in, you come to a locked door that can only be opened with Agranac's key. Within Within this route, you'll find the chamber of Lord Leviticus, but surprisingly, you'll find that he is still alive. Considering the state of the fort, it's surprising to find anyone alive here, but Leviticus is an exception, and that's due to him being a vampire. Vampires are fairly prevalent in Oblivion, and there's even an entire DLC questline surrounding them in Skyrim. While being attacked by a vampire, players have the chance of contracting porphyric hemophilia, which may be cured with something like a cure disease potion within 3 days. If you fail to do so, you are locked into becoming a full-fledged vampire and must feed regularly to keep the effects of vampirism at bay. It's a double-edged sword. The more days you go without feeding, from 1 to 4 days onwards, the more attributes and skill bonuses you will be rewarded with, up to a maximum of +20 to strength, willpower, and speed as an example. That sounds great, right? Unfortunately, you gain up to a 50% weakness to fire, and sunlight does more damage to you the further you are along, forcing you to stay indoors and only travel at night depending on how bad it is. A vampire that just fed can travel during the day without any issue, but someone 4+ days without feeding will have a much more difficult time. There's more advantages per tier than there are disadvantages, in my opinion. Each tier even gains its own active ability that they can cast, from charm spells to turning invisible. Being a vampire has its perks, but God help you if you ever want to cure it after it develops. There's a DLC that makes the cure process fairly painless, but the original way to do it is rather involved and was fairly difficult to complete during my first playthrough. Maybe it isn't as bad as I remember it, and we'll see for ourselves once we reach that point, but that time is not now. I don't plan on becoming a vampire and discussing the cure for some time. So even though Leviticus is hostile, attacks us on sight, and we actually had contracted the disease, I ended up removing it later with a cure disease potion. I actually had to run through this entire dungeon again and redo everything because I leveled up and only had a +4 bonus to endurance. You can see how caring about this leveling process can be detrimental to the gameplay experience. If you're playing for the first time, it may not be completely obvious to you that Leviticus is a vampire. When he dies, he doesn't drop anything like vampire dust, which typical vampires would. However, this is fixed in the unofficial patches. It's when you search through his chambers and find that you learn what really happened in regard to the Grey Prince. As it turns out, Leviticus had been walking through the lands of Tamriel for over 200 years, holding a position of nobility through at least some of that lifetime. During his station at Crowhaven, Leviticus fell in love with an orc, but fearing telling her about his affliction would have her leave him. Once she was of child, Leviticus tried to tell her the truth, but she ended up betraying him out of fear of his vampirism. To get away from Leviticus, Luktov Gromalog no shit locked him in his bedchambers, and he was never able to get out after all these years. The inability to feed caused the Lord to lose his sanity, and you can see this in the journal entries as they continue to get more and more erratic. It's such a silly idea that she just locked a small wooden door that was enough to keep him within the fort for who knows how long. Especially weird since there are other vampires prowling the fort that you would think could use their power to break open the door and free the Lord. I don't know, some of the quests in Oblivion are so nonsensical that even just the hint of thought you put into them makes them begin to crumble. Grabbing the journal continues the questline, and unfortunately for Agranac, we're going to have to break the bad news to him. Back at the Bloodworks, if you talk to Agranac, he will somehow see you have the journal and it will be immediately removed from your inventory. I wish there was an option to not give him the journal or to lie to him about the knowledge we learned, because completing this quest completely breaks Agranac in a way that will have repercussions later during the Arena faction quest. But we'll get there soon. In the meantime, Agranac cannot believe what he is reading. Now believing himself to be a monster, he just wants to be left alone and won't really talk to you again until we challenge him to become the Grand Champion. Before reading the journal, Agranac will reward you with training that gives you a permanent +3 points to Blade, Block, and Athletics. So it is worth completing, even if he is going to hate himself afterward. They are a bonus set of skills that show up as passive abilities on your character sheet, so don't worry about them affecting your level up. I'm not going to waste time explaining all of the arena fights to you. I don't think there's anything interesting that could come out of that except for a few key fights that are worth mentioning. For example, I'd like to mention that the rank you are when participating in these fights doesn't always dictate the difficulty. One of the brawler fights is 2-on-1 as an example. When you reach the gladiator rank, your first fight is 3 Argonian prisoners fighting for their freedom. If they win, they get to leave imprisonment, which is a really messed up scenario if you think about it. I don't know what they did to get imprisoned, but forcing them to fight for your amusement through the power of law doesn't really sit right with me. Although if you watched my New Vegas video, you know how I feel about prison labor in general. But we're not getting into that again. Please God, let's not get into that again. It's just a gross situation. All these prisoners want is to be free, and if you know anything about Argonians, you know that their race has suffered greatly under a history of slavery. It brings up an interesting topic on the morality of what you are doing. I do not personally think it is a morally justifiable decision to take part in battles to the death for glory and the entertainment of spectators. I'm trying to be clear here by saying to the death. There's a difference between what is happening here compared to something like boxing, competitive wrestling, MMA, etc. And with greed and money on the line, there are a lot of ways that this system can be abused that allows those in charge to take advantage of less privileged individuals. You are a free individual who signed up to fight for your own reasons, but we can't say the same is fully true for these Argonians, and it sucks killing them, at least from a narrative and moral sense. From a mechanical sense, these dudes deserve everything that they got because they came at me swinging like a truck and caused me to run around the map for 20 minutes as I healed myself. You may be asking what could be worse than a 3-on-1 fight. The answer is nothing, really. The 3 Argonians are probably the most difficult to fight in the arena. The only other fight that compares to it is when you finally get to fight the yellow team champion, as she has 2 Dunmer backing her up. Luckily, Owen has managed to give you something to even the playing field. A battle boar named Porkchop, who can usually be seen in a cage within the Bloodworks. Porkchop can honestly take care of the 3 fighters, including the yellow team champion, by himself, but distracting the combatants long enough for him to kill them is a very simple and effective strategy that makes the battle, while hilarious, lackluster in terms of impact. Assuming you're victorious, you'll officially have made it to the rank of champion. By this point, Owen has grown to be one of your biggest supporters, and the blue team gladiator is both happy for you and flabbergasted that you managed to get this far. Things are good, but they aren't over yet, at least if you don't want them to be. Owen has nothing left for you, but Isabel will now allow you to set up a challenge with the Great Prince. If you talk to Isabel, she will inform you that you can challenge Agranac, but she advises heavily against it, believing that you are guaranteed to be killed. No one has managed to defeat Agranac for some time, and you are not as impressive to Isabel as you are to everyone else. Talking to Agranac will have him accept the challenge, although he doesn't seem particularly excited about it considering what he is currently going through. This changes if you never bothered to complete the quest, and it's nice that the character's demeanor can change based on progression. Before you enter the fight, Isabel has you choose a title from a set of pre-generated names. I think I chose Dragonheart for this playthrough. You'll be called by your title before the fight begins, and I believe it gets used elsewhere throughout Cyrodiil after your victory, and what a victory it will be. There's a lot to unpack here. First, since this is a special fight, you are allowed to wear whatever armor you wish. This can be beneficial considering that Agranac is a very strong opponent if you fight him normally. As the battle begins, Agranac will charge towards you, but stop once he reaches the middle of the arena. There he does nothing except open himself up to attack, as he has given up on living. The trauma of finding out about his heritage has left Agranac wanting to die, and once the quest is completed, there is no way to bypass this outcome. Should you not have completed the quest, Agranac will fight you normally, but if you want that stat bonus from completing the quest, you are also rewarded with the easiest fight in the arena. This is one of the reasons I wanted there to be a means of lying to him or not giving him the journal. The information was too much for him, and it's a sad scene because there's no backing out of this fight. One of you has to die, and Agranac isn't fighting. So as sad as it is, I ended up using this as an opportunity to level my unarmed skill. Again, it's a bit of a hollow victory. At least it would be if anyone recognized what was going on. No one questions how you won the fight. Isabelle is beside herself with shock and respect for you managing to defeat such a difficult opponent, even though all I did was punch him into his grave while he did nothing to stop me. A bit of an oversight in my opinion that makes the win feel somewhat unrealistic and especially undeserved, although that would always be the case I suppose. I forgot to mention this earlier, but you are allowed to loot the body of the Grand Champion after the fight. Additionally, without the unofficial patches, this is counted as murder but without any criminal charges. For those that don't know, a murder is required to trigger the Dark Brotherhood questline, and I imagine this is how most players would unlock it. Guess I'm going to have to murder someone else later on down the road. By taking his raiment and presenting it to Isabelle, she will make you one of your own as either light or heavy armor. It's up to you. It's worthwhile since the set is enchanted and fairly powerful for this early on, but I rarely utilize it because I think the raiments look like a clown costume. Isabelle decides she wants to milk you for all your worth and introduces the concept of creature battles, where once a week you can choose between 3 options of creatures to fight in order to earn some gold based on your current level and the amount of creatures you're fighting. Even if Agranok had fought you properly, it's all still a bit hollow, and that's due to the nature of the arena and its death battles. The Bloodworks are somewhat empty now. The yellow team champion is dead, Agranok is dead, the blue team gladiator hates you now for killing Agranok, who he considered a mentor and friend. All you have now are Owen, Isabelle, Porkchop I guess, and your title, and not much to do with it. In a way, the arena questline feels like a bit of a tragedy. You fought for glory and to rise up the ranks. Everything was good until you reached the top, because by doing so, you ended up killing the people who have been with you on this journey the entire way. The arena may have been a simplistic faction to take part in, and it may have been repetitive, but it had its moments. It had some memorable battles, and a sense of growing friendships and rivalries within the Bloodworks that are lost once you become a Grand Champion.
The Great Prince is dead. He was my friend, my mentor. Congratulations, Grand Champion. Hope it was worth it.
One final notorious reward for completing the arena is the Adoring Fan, a unique character who is designed to be hated by the player. The fan wants nothing more than to revere you and lick your boots. Acting as a companion, he can follow you virtually everywhere as well. What makes him truly unique is that when he is murdered, he will respawn after a few days, essentially meaning that you can never truly get rid of him without glitches and bugs. I'm not going to go on a big tirade about the NPC. I think it's been done to death at this point. The fun of the character is having a dummy you can torture for virtually no repercussions. Just make sure there's no witnesses, as it is still counted as a crime. So where do we go from here? Well, depending on what gear you've been using throughout the arena, chances are a lot of it has needed to be repaired. Degradation affects the effectiveness of your equipment and has to be either repaired by a shop or by yourself using armor and hammers. We'll use this as an opportunity to discuss the bartering and disposition system in Oblivion. Almost every character has a level of disposition towards you from 1 to 100, and it's affected in various ways. I won't go over every factor, but your personality stat affects it, as well as whether or not you are part of the same faction as the NPC you are talking to. If you talk to someone with your weapon raised, they'll have a -10 disposition penalty until you sheath it. To manually raise disposition and to train the speechcraft skill, you have to take part in another obtuse minigame. The higher the disposition, the more they like you. Within the minigame, you have 4 quadrants to choose from. You may select each of them once, and that constitutes a round. After 4 rounds, you have chosen each quadrant, and that attempt at persuasion is complete. The quadrants consist of boast, admire, joke, and coerce. Each character feels differently about these quadrants, but they will always love one, hate another, and slightly like or dislike the other 2. This is always the case, and you can tell which is which by hovering over the quadrant while watching their facial expression change. The idea is that with each selection, the colored bars that fill the quadrants will spin into a new position. Ideally, you will want to have the most loved quadrant be selected when it has a full gauge, and you want the opposite with the most hated. The other options are less relevant, but it's best to try and get them so that you can get out with the most positive choices. This means you need to get used to gauging where a gauge will land when you need it, and whether you can make that happen without having a large gauge land on a negative quadrant. You need to get quick at this, as taking too long can lower their disposition over time. Even today, I find the speechcraft minigame to be both confusing and contrived. It only gets easier as you raise the skill to unlock various perks, but trying to quickly understand your best course of action will rarely make sense to you until you practice it enough or you simplify the process. The issue is that there is rarely ever a reason to do this. Due to the uninviting nature of the minigame, characters are more likely to use the bribe mechanic to raise disposition or potentially learn a charm spell to do the same. If you really care about learning speechcraft, it's best to play the minigame on everyone you meet while only focusing on getting the best and most options out of the way optimally and not caring about the quadrants in between. It's not an engaging experience or in any way enjoyable to take part in, making leveling speechcraft one of the worst skills to do so next to maybe mercantile or alchemy. It does get easier with practice, but I don't believe you'll ever find it rewarding, and it wouldn't surprise me if you naturally learn the ability to charm someone on your travels. Where disposition is most important is when a character is withholding information from you. Sometimes a higher disposition will allow them to divulge more to you. Additionally, you can haggle prices with merchants using a slider to dictate the percentage price of the items sold or bought. The higher you make it, the less likely it is to succeed, and this is based on both your disposition and mercantile skill, while the range you can move the bar is based on the mercantile skill of the merchant. For merchants specifically, selling them items worth 100 gold or more will raise their disposition by 1 with each sale, while failing to haggle will lower it. I'd have preferred to just have a speechcraft check similar to what we have in Fallout 3 or New Vegas, a normal skill check that is applied to dialogue options, but to be fair, that wouldn't really work here. Unlike Fallout, where you just allocate points on level up, you need to actively raise your skills in Oblivion. So it makes sense that it would be tied to a minigame that raises a disposition stat for the NPC. The real fix is finding a new form of minigame that is actually engaging to take part in. Having the ability to actively persuade people is a great concept, just one that was implemented poorly here. On the topic of merchants, if you aren't used to Bethesda games, you may find it annoying that you can only sell so much to a merchant before they run out of gold to buy your items with. This is because generally commerce in these games focus on trading with gold as a currency. You aren't expected to just sell for gold, but to trade your goods and currency for goods from the merchant. So you can offset the amount of gold the merchant has to work with by actually buying things from them. This is less true in Oblivion. Instead, merchants are only willing to purchase items at a maximum amount. If the merchant's maximum pool is 800, but you have a piece of armor worth 2,000, even after haggling, then you will only earn 800 by selling it to said merchant. Once your mercantile skill is high enough though, you can invest in a shop to get a permanent 500 gold bonus to their pool. Additionally, someone who is a master in mercantile causes all shops to naturally have an additional 500. So if you really get mercantile up, it'll even itself out. But during this entire playthrough, I didn't even make it to the investment level of mercantile, let alone the mastery of it. It is high time we head out to Wayne and Priory to deliver the amulet to Joffrey, but assuming you aren't fast traveling, you may want a horse to help you on your journey. Lucky for us, Chestnut stables are immediately outside the Imperial City gates, and even more lucky for us, this is where we can acquire horse armor if we so choose. Horses in Oblivion aren't all that special, and horse armor DLC is more or less the same. If you own the Game of the Year edition, you may not realize that the inclusion of horse armor didn't exist within the original release. In fact, horse armor was the first ever DLC release for the game and popularized the use of microtransactions to squeeze out every last penny from players. In total, there were 8 microtransaction DLC released for Oblivion of the varying price and quality. Alongside that, there were 2 more substantial expansions, which we will get into later. The announcement that Bethesda would be releasing something as minimal as horse armor for purchase in order to add content to their game led to waves of mass hysteria and ridicule from not only the Oblivion player base, but the entirety of consumers within the market. Bethesda led the charge of microtransactions, revolutionizing how content was delivered to players, but they were backed by the new Xbox marketplace that was designed to facilitate them. Microtransactions are still a sore spot for a lot of people, but it's hard to argue that Oblivion didn't have a hand in its popularization, considering they were the first RPG on the console and the first to offer something like this. Many players believe that the price of $2.50 USD to be too much for what they considered a cosmetic item in a single-player game. Now, I don't want to defend the price, but I will point out that the horse armor is not cosmetic alone. By purchasing the armor for your horse, their health pool will be doubled, but only to a point. A horse's health pool could not exceed 750. So if you had a horse like Shadowmere as an example who has 500 health and equip it with the armor, Shadowmere will have a 750 health instead of 1000. So credit where it's due. As absurd
Привет, X, how are you doing?
Considered at the time, it did have more than a cosmetic functionality. All of the packs fell within the $1 to $3 USD range. Although horse armor had this odd discrepancy where it was priced at $250 on the Xbox Marketplace but $199 on PC. The reasoning for this was explained by Todd Howard as them wanting to sell it cheaper on Xbox, but some representative at Microsoft insisted on the $2.50 price point. Luckily, these prices would begin to be consolidated with future releases. Ironically, as much as it was lambasted by the player base and press, Horse Armor ended up being the
Важная
best-selling DLC
информация.
for
Блин, не
so whether it was
пугай
awful
меня,
for players or
приложение
not, it
своими
unfortunately
уведомлениями.
performed well and was a beacon for developers moving into the future. At the very least, many of the future DLC Bethesda released would be cheaper for more substantial content, mostly in the form of player homes that could be upgraded. The armor itself was sold by Snack Barbera at the stables. They don't actually sell horses, but luckily Bethesda facilitated
что
new
ты
players by
спросила, я
allowing them to get
ответил.
one free horse from the orc, although it
О
has
май
worse
гад.
stats in the game, including the lowest tier of speed, attack, and health. Other horses of varying speeds and health can be purchased at select stables, and there's even a unicorn you can ride for free that we'll see a bit later on, although that is mostly meant as a temporary bonus / Easter egg. The best horse we can receive is also free, but you only end up unlocking it during the Dark Brotherhood quest line. Conceptually, I think
how are
Horse
you
Armor was
doing?
a fine
А не
inclusion
что
if
ты
it was available from the get-go or as a free
Ладно,
inclusion like in
это
the Game of the
уже-
Year edition. I don't know if I'd pay the money for it now, and I'm curious what it would be priced at if released in a future game like Skyrim or The
Семантика.
Elder Scrolls 6. We'll return to the Imperial City a bit later and begin looking at some of the side quests there, but now that we have a horse, we can finally make our way to Wayland Priory. Like I have mentioned already, I encourage players to make the trip without fast traveling there, especially since there are plenty of caves, mines, forts, and ruins to explore that can benefit you greatly by offering randomized loot to obtain, some of which can be more powerful than you expect early in the game. Just over the bridge, you can meet a man that wants you to kill 12 slaughterfish for him since he needs the scales to sell, but he was recently injured. I don't plan on discussing every menial quest like this in detail, but I'm pointing it out because the reward is a ring with an athletics bonus and a permanent water breathing buff, which will come in handy later. If you feel like it, hit up the nearby inn to start a quest where you need to find 6 bottles of Shadow Banished wine for the innkeeper, as she's a collector and will pay you 1,000 gold if you can accomplish this for her. You might also find your
Так,
first
у
sample
меня
of
есть
Nern fruit along the way and be
она
surprised that it
должна
starts a
быть.
quest for you. One of the worst quests in the game, in fact, and we'll be covering that as we make our way to Skingrad while searching for Uriel Septon's there. Regardless, we will soon find ourselves outside Wayland Priory. Wayland is a very calming location. It's just outside the walls of Coral, which we will also be visiting in a moment, and you really get the feeling like nothing goes on here. Just a peaceful little area that monks hang
Кто-то
out in
видосик
to
на фон
pray,
показал.
or
Нет,
whatever
я
it is
сама
monks do.
поставила,
Feel free
чтобы
to
что-то
inform
на
me what the
фоне было.
day-to-day is like for Wayland Priory, as I'm curious. Within the main building, we can find Joffrey on the second floor behind the desk. When he asks if we need anything, we can hand him the amulet and explain what happened within the sewers. News of the Emperor's death has already begun to spread. You can even find notes of letters within the Priory of people discussing it, as well as a newsletter from the Black Horse Courier. If you enjoy reading, you'll get a lot out of Oblivion. Newspapers help make the world feel alive while informing you of the goings-on, from the Emperor's assassination to discussions centered around the Grey Fox, the leader of the Thieves Guild, which some believe doesn't exist. Joffrey will be surprised that we both have the amulet and are delivering it to him. I mean, I'd be surprised too. The amulet's base value is 1,000 gold after all, so some of it would make a lot of sense from a role-playing perspective if it was possible to do so. You can't even wear the thing since some form of magic makes it slip off your neck whenever you try. Joffrey seems suspicious of you at first, and I mean, who wouldn't be with the death of the Emperor? But after telling him his last words, he chooses to believe you. You did deliver the amulet to him after all. Why would you do that if you didn't want to help him in some way? Plus, I imagine that Boris would be able to corroborate your story if Joffrey decided to look into it. I imagine he can't send out a letter and wait for a reply since time is of the essence though, so Joffrey has to go with his gut and divulge the location of Martin Septim to you, the last of the Septim line who is currently a priest of Akash. Joffrey also mentions that when an emperor is crowned, during the coronation they light the dragon fires found within the Temple of the One in the Imperial City. Since the emperor is dead and there is no one to take up the throne, the fires will be out for the first time in centuries, and this could be related to the threat of oblivion breaking its way into the mortal realm. Martin is the illegitimate son of Uriel and is voiced by Sean Bean. Since he is the last of the Septim line, Joffrey believes there's a good chance that those who assassinated the emperor may know of Martin's existence, putting him in danger. Therefore, Joffrey wishes for you to go and check on Martin, inform him of his heritage, and bring him back to the priory where Joffrey plans to keep the amulet safe. Before you go, you can ask Joffrey and the other monks for assistance. They'll provide you with an assortment of goods that should bolster your defenses and skills somewhat, but I highly recommend using this as a breakpoint from the main storyline. Being so close to Coral, I believe this is the perfect time to get the city-specific quests here completed, especially since some of the rewards are so powerful. Sure, Martin is in danger, but it's not like we need to rush over there. It's not like Daedra are going to destroy the entire city, right? Right? Anyway, I'm not going to go in great detail about every city and their settings / locales because I don't think it's particularly interesting for this video, at least to me. What I do want to focus on are the quests you complete within them and some key points about key cities when we reach them. For example, Coral is fairly quaint, and you can buy a home here just like any of the other major cities, if you have the funds to do so. When you arrive, I recommend heading to the Northern Goods and Trade to talk to Dharma, an Argonian woman, if she isn't outside currently. You need to talk to Dharma in order to trigger an in-game timer that will lead to another quest later. That's something I really appreciate about Oblivion. Sometimes you'll do something so inconsequential, completing a small quest or just talking to someone once, and you'll never expect it to lead anywhere further. Next thing you know, someone is asking your help in a matter relating to what you had done days prior, as if anything could happen at any time and set you down a new adventurous path to fame and fortune, which is especially potent on a first playthrough, something I wish I could experience again. If you head over to the Grey Mare, you can meet with Valis Odile, who offers a simple quest, but one that I recommend completing early as it provides a powerful reward for this point in the game. Specifically, I'm talking about Chillrend, a leveled one-handed blade that inflicts frost damage as well as weakness to frost, meaning it's extra effective in terms of elemental damage. If you haven't completed the arena yet, this weapon can clear it easily. Odile has two sons and they come from a farm not far off that has been infested with goblins. He's supposed to help his sons defend the farm, but he's old and scared of him and his kids dying. He asks you to aid them and will reward you with Chillrend if you manage to do so successfully without either of the sons dying. If one son dies, he only offers 150 gold, and if they both die, you get nothing. Very simple concept for a very powerful reward, so again, I highly recommend it. On the topic of goblins, I have been asked by multiple people online to mention the hidden and not fully implemented mechanic of Goblin Wars. The best way to understand Goblin Wars is to quickly take part in the Goblin Trouble questline, which can be found in a camp southeast of the Imperial City. This is because, to my knowledge, there is no way to actually create your own Goblin War outside of the quest. The UESP wiki seems to describe the mechanic as if it's actually in the game. I personally couldn't get it to work outside of the quest where I generate my own war, but it may still be possible. If you want an in-depth look at the mechanic itself outside of what I will be explaining via the quest, you can check out Remy Down Under's video on it using the link in the description. The quest itself is simple enough and lays out the rules for how the mechanic of Goblin Wars should work. There's a camp of individuals who have been displaced from their new settlement, which they just started building. The people of Croxford have unfortunately been ejected due to a war between two goblin tribes, the Bloody Hand and the Rockbiter Goblins. Talking to Barthel Jernand, we can agree to help with the situation so the group can get back to work on their new home. Barthel points us to Marissa, who is the guide of the group, and she lays out the situation for us. A totem has been stolen by the Rockbiters from the Bloody Hands. Now, the two tribes are at war, and there are two ways for us to end it. We either steal the totem back from the Rockbiters, or we kill the shaman of the Bloody Hands. For the sake of the mechanic, we will attempt to steal the staff back, which is pretty easy. I ended up doing this quest a bit later in the playthrough, so our gear and skills made it easy to bypass everything. This was also helped by the two tribes fighting with one another while ignoring us. During the battle, we can kill the goblin who has the staff, and by grabbing it, the war is officially over, or rather on hold. When we return with the totem staff to Marissa, she mentions that the war should be over and that Crossford can begin building once again. However, she also mentions that we could return the staff to the Bloody Hands or potentially give it to another goblin tribe to start a new war. I personally couldn't get this to work, but feel free to try it out for yourself. The UESP mentions that you can return the staff to the rock fighters instead if you want, and this will spark the war anew, causing Crossford to become a battle zone again. Unfortunately, I only realized this after the fact. More importantly, this quest has another unique mechanic. The town of Crossford will begin to develop over time within 4 stages. If you're watching the video, you should see some pictures of the effect now, but it essentially has the village go from scaffolding to having a couple buildings. Barthel tells you to come back in a month's time to see the small village built for yourself, and I was both impressed and surprised to learn that the developers followed through with this obscure idea when they didn't have to. A lot of detail goes into the places you wouldn't expect, while a lack of detail can end up in the forefront of the game. It's an interesting balance. Again, if you want to learn more about Goblin Trouble and Goblin Wars, feel free to check out the linked video in the description. Additionally, settlement quests like this will not be explored in detail throughout the retrospective. I may mention some here and there due to their interesting quest design, but a good portion of them are short one-offs designed to get you spelunking in caves for loot. One particular quest has you searching for a missing man after finding his home abandoned. He's trying to make an offering to a being known as the Sunken One. After tracking him down, you find him deceased. You can read his diary to learn about the Sunken One, and then a special storm atronach will spawn for you to fight or run from. It is specifically named the Sunken One, which I thought was a nice touch for a quest most people aren't going to find. Heading back to Coral, the next quest we can discuss is Canvas the Castle, which is a play on words as we will be canvassing the castle for a missing painting. Countess Ariana Volga is in the middle of an investigation. A portrait of the late Count Volga has gone missing and she needs someone to find it for her. If you accept, you would have to complete the following tasks: interview the witnesses and search for clues, in that order specifically. You can't actually search for evidence until you talk to everyone, which is another missed opportunity here. What makes investigations and mysteries so fun and full of potential is the ability for them to be solved by the player through deduction and a keen eye. Yet even if you search through the castle and find a specific room in a specific watchtower that has a specific painting that is glaringly obvious to be important, you can't actually interact with it until everyone has been talked to. This hurts the quest's design because once it comes time to search for evidence, you may be under the assumption that the painting didn't mean anything at all. Potentially a red herring, and you'll soon waste your time elsewhere trying to find what you can to put the pieces together. I recall this causing me to get stumped during this quest, and while I still completed it, it wasn't the way I wanted to do so. Since we have to follow the quest the limited way the developers intended, let's discuss the witnesses. Chanel is the court mage who claims she has an alibi. She was outside taking star readings for the majority of the evening before returning to the castle to study them, with a glass of wine. Leith Waverick is the castle's herald and claims to have not seen anything, although he does mention Orgnal, the castle porter, is a drunk and is so broke he has to borrow money to curb his addiction, suggesting that stealing and selling the painting could facilitate this. That makes Orgnalf a main suspect, especially after talking to Orok, the Countess's steward, who mentions that he caught Orgnalf drinking in the West Tower. Remember there's a painting there? Remember that you can't interact with it if you go and look after receiving this news. Just very disappointing. And I believe Bitneld will mention the same when discussing his patrol of Coral, considering he is the captain of the guard. Bitneld will mention that Chanel was also seen within the West Tower, and her excuse for being there involved studying spells. If we remember back, Chanel mentioned she was creating star charts to study at night, but this seems less likely considering 2 individuals have mentioned that it was raining outside. Taking this as a lie, this means that Orgnalf and Chanel are both suspects, and now that you've talked to everyone, the quest stage will finally allow you to start searching for evidence. Orgnalf claimed to be arguing with a delivery boy before retiring.
Oh my god.
Evidence to suggest otherwise other than finding the area in which he drinks in the West Tower. However, this location is at the top of the tower, and the painting I mentioned, which you can actually interact with now, is at the bottom. If we trace Chanel's path through the castle, we can find some tracks.
Oh my god.
So we have paint stains and a painting, but
Orok, how are you doing?
There's a lectern full of painting supplies that concludes everything you need to find. All of the evidence and witness
Тогда
testimony
как раз
points to
первый,
Chanel, and
пожалуй,
if you
на этом.
accuse her with a disposition of 70 or higher, she'll confess, explaining that she stole it out of her love for the Count and due to being envious of the time spent with it. She hid it behind another one of her paintings in her chambers, and I don't know if you can retrieve it or not. I didn't, and it still showed back up in the Countess's
О, мы
chambers
тут
after the
не
quest was
одни.
completed, so let me know. You can choose to accuse either Chanel
Да.
or Ordnolf, or you can choose to drop Overall. Accusing Ordnolf gets you nothing spectacular, but proving it was Chanel allows the portrait to be displayed once more and earns you a leveled amount of gold plus 8 gems. Now, I don't think the game is trying to make some big moral statement, and I don't even think it was trying to do that back in the arena with the Argonians, but I do think it wants to facilitate a happier ending for Chanel for a few reasons. One is we have to consider, as the player or as our character, how much do we care that the Countess lost her painting? Chanel seems to care about it enough to steal it, and it's not like she was selling it. Do we care that much that the Countess may never receive it back? Does someone deserve it more than the other? Those are questions you have to ask yourself. If you absolve Chanel and Ordnolf after she comes clean, Chanel will be grateful to you. You'll get barely any gold from the Countess, but Chanel will reward you with a painting after 3 weeks, which can be sold for 500 gold. Still a less valuable reward than what the Countess offers, but it prevents Chanel from being kicked out of Coral. Yeah, the Countess won't imprison her, but she will exile her, and Chanel will disappear from the game completely. So do what you think is best. I decided to turn her in for the reward for mechanical reasons, but if it were me as the character I'm playing, I probably wouldn't have said anything. By the way, that painting you received can actually be placed down by removing it from your inventory, and it stands on an easel, making it a unique piece of furniture if placed in one of your homes. Overall, I love little quests like this because they add entire genres of narrative and mechanics as side content to the fantastical adventure. Oblivion's side content is so strong because it's so unique.
Что на фоне базарит? Ретро-перспектива по игре Oblivion длиной 12 часов.
Not being able to stray off the intended path at all times, and while I find these limitations severe,
Мне нужно было что-то для фона, иначе я уснул.
that you can solve in a short playthrough. Did you know that you can ask about rumors from the various NPCs in the game world? Sometimes these rumors are nothing more than gossip or world building, but sometimes they point you towards a new quest. Take the rumors surrounding Reynold Germain as an example.
Ты починила звуки, они починились сами. Я с ними ничего бы не смогла сделать. Что можно говорить в течение 12 часов? Ну, если учесть, что эту игру можно проходить, наверное, часов 100, даже не трогая главный квест, наверное, что-то можно.
ogre attack on their family's property. Their father had died, and Gilbert assumed his mother and brother had as well. Now he understands that his mother must have gotten Reynold to safety before passing on from her wound in the attack. Gilbert decides to head to Coral to meet his brother, and you can either fast travel back there or join him for the journey. Once the two are reunited, Gilbert explains to Reynold what happened when they were kids, and the brothers will be reunited. Helping them out actually leads into a series of 3 quests involving the brothers.
Очень тихо слышно. Да я не знаю почему.
A few in-game days later when talking to a specific individual. The first quest was reuniting them, and Gilbert now explains that they want to reacquire their childhood home back
Уф, я вообще не услышал.
Brothers don't remember exactly where the home was, but know it was south of Coral. This is one of those rare opportunities in the game where you can actively search for a location based on how an NPC described it to you. It's not required, however. If you ask around, you can meet someone who will point you towards this specific location, but having the option is nice, and you may not realize you can ask around about it anyway. It adds options which help flesh out the possibilities from player to player. Searching for the home was interesting because I thought I found it only to realize I located the village of Hackdirt, which had almost burned down at one point in time. Hackdirt is eerie, and if you sleep at the small inn located in the village, there's a chance you'll be assaulted by a Hackdirt brethren. If you're curious about why that happened, don't worry, we're going to cover it shortly, but unfortunately you can't look into it just yet as you can't seem to ask anyone about it. Another example of mysteries unfolding around you with no way of exploring them until the game wants you to. Once you find the home, you can clear it out and report back to the brothers for a leveled gold reward after exploring through there. From this point, you need to wait approximately 2 days before you will be approached by or can approach Fathus Ools or Oolies and Coral. Fathis here is a fence for
Опять
thieves
один канал по
who haven't
звуку
started the
уходит,
quest
если
line
он
yet
уже
and may
звук
not
моно в
realize that,
режиме
but it's given away by him
транслируется.
having a barter option
Да
that you can
ёбаный
select.
карась.
If you attempt to select it while not being part of the Thieves Guild, he will deny buying or selling anything. Fathis also has a history with thievery, as we'll soon learn, so it's very apparent once the quest is underway. Fathis is normally found in the Imperial City, but he relocates after you finish the 2 quests for the Germain brothers. He'll approach you, or you can approach him, as I mentioned, and he'll comment on how he knows you helped the brothers, but claims there's treasure within their reclaimed abode. As it turns out, the Germain brothers' father was a talented thief as well, and Fathis hired him to steal a unique weapon known as the Honor Blade of Coral. The father betrayed Fathis and never delivered the weapon, but now Fathis wants to get what he believes to be rightfully his. Since the home was attacked by ogres, it's believed the weapon has most likely been taken to a nearby ogre cave. If you were to go there and retrieve it, Fathis claims he would reward you greatly. You head to the nearby ogre den close to the home of the Germain brothers, you fight your way through and eventually find the blade on the body of one of the inhabitants there. A very interesting aspect of the quest comes to light is when you are delivering the blade. The first thing you notice is how powerful the Honor Blade of Coral is. It's an unenchanted weapon without level requirements and a base damage of 23, which is one of the highest in the game. Claiming a weapon like that early on can help make a melee character very powerful for the trials ahead. If you wanted to, you could keep the blade for yourself and never complete the quest, but there are better rewards to be had if we return it, and we can obtain it again later if we desire. But who do we return it to? If we return it to Fathis, he will offer us gold as a reward based on our level, but there is another option. The Honor Blade of Coral was stolen from the castle and the Countess. If we return it there, not only is it back in the hands of the rightful owner, but we are rewarded with the Escutcheon of Coral, a leveled shield that fortifies endurance and reflects damage to anyone who attacks the wielder. A much better reward in my opinion, considering the enchantments of the shield and the fact that it is ebony tier. Your choice also affects the Germain brothers. If you deliver the blade to Fathis, you are then tasked with informing the brothers about their father's history. They won't believe you and you'll lose disposition with the 2 of them. However, if you return it to the castle and then talk to the brothers, they will believe the story of their father's past and thank you for returning it while gaining disposition between the 2. Regardless of what you choose, the home of the brothers will be cleaned up and furnished, and Reynold Germain will finally begin to sober up. Sometimes quests give you worse rewards for doing the right thing. It's the idea that sometimes doing the right thing is its own reward, and games often offset this with other bonuses you may not have been aware of generally. That can be an exhausting process for players, to always do the right thing and not be properly rewarded for it. That's one thing in the real world, but within a game, we would often hope to receive something for our actions. It's the entire reason we do quests in a game like Elder Scrolls that don't focus on morality mechanics. Luckily, the reward for doing the right thing in this situation is more desirable than returning the blade to Fathis. The Escutcheon is both a powerful and valuable artifact, and it allows the questline of the Germain brothers to end on a high note after all the work you put in, should you choose to return it. But maybe you want to keep this sword because of how powerful it was. Well, luckily for you, the game has an option for that after the fact. As it turns out, the Countess will equip the sword on her person while being active in the castle. She will unequip it while sleeping, but it will stay in her inventory. This means you can sneak into her chambers at night and reclaim the blade for yourself if you so desire. I recommend doing this during the Canvas the Castle quest, as you have access to most of the restricted areas of the castle during your investigation. Otherwise, you'll have to do what I did and try to tiptoe your way around before hiding out and waiting for the Countess to sleep.
Take this. It's from a friend.
Jesus Christ, that is something that can happen a lot in Oblivion. Sometimes you're waiting in place or exploring a location, and then next thing you know, blam! Dunmer handing you a letter before absconding from the scene. I didn't mention it yet, but I did get arrested for trespassing at some point, and going to jail at least once is what triggers the Thieves Guild to seek you out. We're not ready for that quest line just yet, but we'll get there. There's still several factions we need to explore. Before we can leave Coral and make our way to Skingrad on the way to Kvatch, you may notice that Dharma is nowhere to be found. I suggested it when we arrived, but it's important to talk to Dharma at least once, as this is the trigger to start a shadow over Hackdirt. I told you we'd be going back there shortly. If you head back to the Northern Goods and Trade, the proprietor, Seed Neas, will mention that her daughter has gone missing after making a delivery to the village of Hackdirt. A shadow over Hackdirt is a direct reference to the H.P. Lovecraft story, The Shadow over Innsmouth, revolving around a fishing village village, a cult, and a race of fish-like humanoids known as the Deep Ones. In fact, this story is so famous that it has been adapted and referenced in a variety of video games, the most obvious being Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth, which takes place within Innsmouth proper. It's similar within Oblivion. Hacked Earth would be considered the Innsmouth of Cyrodiil. Instead of a fishing village, it was a mining village where the residents discovered natural caverns underneath. There, they met the Deep Ones, a race of beings that lived underground and helped the residents become rich at the cost of ritual sacrifice. At one point, the Imperial Legion stepped in, leading to the death of several villagers and the destruction of multiple buildings, while driving off the Deep Ones permanently in the process. Now the villagers of Hacked Earth have rebuilt somewhat, but exploring the town you will find various buildings still in ruin. As it turns out, the villagers still worship the Deep Ones even though they have disappeared and have created a series of tunnels underneath their homes, which each building is connected to via a trapdoor. People that seem to physically change from this worship are known as Hacked Earth Brethren, and this is one of the NPCs that attacked us previously when we slept at the inn. The villagers now plan to perform a sacrifice in order to bring back the Deep Ones, and as you may have guessed, the sacrifice is meant to be Dharma. Hacked Earth is not a welcoming community. They blame outsiders for the loss of the Deep Ones and do not trust anyone new that comes to the village. Despite that, they do see connections with the outside
Окей,
world
спасибо,
provides,
что
hence why
зашел.
Dharma
Bye.
is delivering goods to the village's merchant, Atira Moslem. Atira will mention that she hasn't seen any Dharma, and she acts a bit upset over it since she claims she needs supplies and wants Dharma and her mother to make up for this loss of revenue. If you leave the shop, you can find Dharma's horse just behind it and then bring this up to Atira, who will claim that the horse belongs to her. It's obvious that something is wrong here. We've been attacked, Dharma has clearly made it to the village, but no one is talking about any of that to you. That is except for Jiv Hiriel, who is willing to meet with you within his home in the evening. Jiv will inform you that he didn't realize how far the residents of Hacked Earth were willing to go for the Deep Ones, and he can't stomach the idea of murdering someone in ritual sacrifice. He informs you that there are trapdoors within each home and suggests using the one within the inn as it is the closest area to Dharma's cell. He also suggests going in around midnight as everyone in the village will be within the chapel, making it easy to access the caverns without being caught. Within the caverns, you will run into the Hacked Earth Brethren I mentioned earlier, but no Deep Ones, as they have been driven off. They do seem to have existed, but they are not here any longer.
Сохраним. И на этом, пожалуй, все. Потому что не надо пойти пройтись. Где-то уже сейчас. Тарарарарам, тарарарарам. Ну что ж, кое-что сегодня успела, хотя, конечно, до прям окончания этого арта мне далековато еще, но хоть что-то. Что я вообще хотела сказать? Да, наверное, мне надо что-нибудь и завтра постримить, но уже не рисовать, потому что, да. В общем, спасибо всем, кто смотрел этот стрим, кто общался в чате. Всем пока!